The Wee Free Men by Terry Pratchett. Read by Tony Robinson. Some things start before other things. It was a summer shower, but didn't appear to know it, and it was pouring rain as fast as a winter storm. Miss Perspicacia Tick didn't notice the rain. Witches dried out quickly. She sat in what little shelter a raggedy hedge could give her, and explored the universe with a couple of twigs tied together with string, a stone with a hole in it, an egg, one of Miss Tick's stockings, also with a hole in it, a pin, a piece of paper, and a tiny stub of pencil. These items had been twisted together to make a device.
"Yes,"
she said quietly as rain poured off the rim of her hat.
"There it is. A definite ripple in the walls of the world. Probably another world making contact. I ought to go there. But, according to my left elbow, there's a witch there already." "She'll sort it out, then,"
said a small and for now mysterious voice from somewhere near her feet.
"No, it can't be right. That's chalk country. You can't grow a good witch on chalk. It's too soft. Believe me, you need good, hard rock."
Miss Tick shook her head.
"But my elbows are generally reliable. Let's have a look."
She pulled a cracked saucer out of her pocket and tipped into it the rainwater that had collected on her hat. Then, from another pocket, she took a bottle of ink and poured in just enough to turn the water black. She cupped it in her hands to keep the raindrops out, and listened to her eyes. Tiffany Aching was lying on her stomach by the river tickling trout. She liked to hear them laugh. It came up in bubbles. A little way away, her brother Wentworth was messing around with a stick and making himself sticky. Anything could make Wentworth sticky. Washed, dried, and left in the middle of a clean floor for 5 minutes, Wentworth would be sticky. But he was an easy child to mind, provided you stopped him eating frogs. There was a small part of Tiffany's brain that wasn't too certain about the name Tiffany. She was 9, and only last week had decided she wanted to be a witch when she grew up. But Tiffany, she was certain, just wouldn't work. People would laugh. Another larger part of Tiffany's brain was thinking of the word susurrus, a word not many people have thought about ever. As her fingers rubbed the trout under its chin, she rolled it round and round in her head. Susurrus. According to her grandmother's dictionary, which she'd read all the way through because no one had told her you weren't supposed to, it meant a low, soft sound as of whispering or muttering. Tiffany liked the taste of the word. Susurrus, 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 susurrus. Suddenly she realized the trout had swum away. But something else was in the water, only a few inches from her face. It was a round basket, no bigger than half a coconut shell, and a little man, only 6 inches high, was standing up in it. He had a mass of untidy red hair, a red beard, and the rest of him that wasn't covered with blue tattoos was covered with a tiny kilt, and he was waving a fist at her.
"Drivens! Gang awa out o' here, ye daft henny! Where the green heed?"
And with that he pulled at a string that was hanging over the side of the boat, and a second man surfaced, gulping air. The first man hauled him aboard.
"Nae time for fishing! The green heed's coming! Drivens! Let's off-ski then!"
The swimmer grabbed one very small oar, and the basket sped away into the reeds. And then there was a susurrus. There was no wind, but the leaves on the bushes began to shake and rustle. So did the reeds by the river bank. The air fizzed, and the water began to bubble. Suddenly it was darker and greener. Tiffany took a couple of steps backwards just before long, skinny arms fountained out of the water and clawed madly at where she'd been. For a moment she saw a thin face with long, sharp teeth, huge round eyes, and dripping green hair like waterweed. Then the thing plunged back into the depths. By the time the water closed over it, Tiffany was already running along the bank to where Wentworth was making frog pies. She snatched the child up just as once again the water boiled and the green-haired creature shot up, long arms clawing at the mud. Then it screamed and dropped back into the water.
"I want to go to toilet,"
shrieked Wentworth. Tiffany ignored him. She was watching the river. How strange, she thought. I'm not scared at all. I ought to be. I'm just angry. How dare a monster turn up in the river, especially one so ridiculous? Who did it think she was? But there was no point telling anyone. They'd only say, what an imagination the child has if they were in a good mood, or don't tell stories if they weren't.
Wanna go to toilet,
screamed Wentworth. This is Tiffany walking back home. Start with the boots. They're big and heavy, much repaired by her father, and they'd belonged to various sisters before her. The dress, too, has been owned before her, and has been taken up, taken out, taken down, and taken in by her mother so many times that it really ought to have been taken away. But Tiffany rather likes it. It comes down to her ankles, and is milky blue. Then there's Tiffany's face. Light pink, brown eyes, brown hair. Nothing special. Then go further up, and further, until the track becomes a ribbon, and Tiffany and her brother 2 little dots. And there is her country. They call it the chalk. Green downlands roll under the hot midsummer sun. From up here, the flocks of sheep drift over the short turf like clouds on a green sky, and here and there sheepdogs speed over the turf like comets. And then as the eyes pull back, it's a long green mound lying like a great whale on the world, surrounded by the inky rainwater in the saucer. Miss Tick looked up.
"She's the witch, then, is she?"
said the voice.
"At that age, impossible. And yet she wasn't scared. This child needs watching."
The rain had stopped now, and Miss Tick looked up. The chalk was about 5 miles away. Granny Aching, who died 2 years ago, used old words, and she didn't call the downland the chalk. She called it the wold. Up on the wold the wind blows cold, Tiffany had thought, and the word had stuck that way. Her father rented their farm from the Baron, who owned the land, but since there'd been Achings farming it for hundreds of years, her father said as far as the land knew, it was owned by the Achings. Tiffany's mother would tell him not to speak like that. It paid to be respectful to the Baron, and the poor man did have his sorrows. But her father insisted that the Achings, or Achins, or Archons, or Akens, spelling had always been optional, had always been shepherds and had these hills in their bones. And for as long as Tiffany could remember, her father, an otherwise quiet, slow man, had made the joke, the one that must have been handed down for hundreds of years. He'd say, "Another day of work and I'm still aching," or "I get up aching and I go to bed aching," or even, "I'm aching all over." They weren't particularly funny after the 3rd time, but they didn't have to be. They were father jokes. When she arrived at the farm, there was no one in the kitchen. Her mother had gone up to the pens with lunch for the men who were shearing this week. Her sisters Hannah and Fastidia were up there too. Near the stove was the small shelf that her mother still called Granny Aching's library. There were only 5 books. There was the dictionary, there was the almanac, which got changed every year, and there was Diseases of the Sheep. Granny had been an expert on sheep, and other shepherds would walk miles to get her to come and cure their beasts of ailments. They said she had the touch, although she said the best medicine for sheep or man was simply a dose of turpentine, a good cussing, and a kick. The next book was a thin little volume called Flowers of the Chalk, and on the flyleaf was written in neat handwriting, Sarah Grizzle, which had been Granny's name before she was married. She probably thought that Aching was at least better than Grizzle. And finally there was The Good Child's Book of Fairy Tales. Tiffany took it down now, found the page she was looking for, and stared at it for a while. Then she put it back, took a soup plate from the crockery cupboard and the tape measure from its drawer, and she measured the plate. 8 inches. Why didn't they just say? She unhooked the largest frying pan and took some sweets from the jar on the dresser, putting them in an old paper bag. Then, to Wentworth's bewilderment, she took him by a sticky hand and headed back to the stream. Things looked normal there now, but she wasn't going to let that fool her. The birds weren't singing. She hammered a piece of wood into the ground close to the river bank and tied the bag of sweets to it. "Sweeties, Wentworth," she called. Then, gripping the frying pan, she stepped smartly behind a bush. Wentworth duly trotted over to the sweet bag, and his fat fingers scrabbled at the knots while Tiffany watched the water carefully. Was it getting darker, greener? Were those bubbles just a trout laughing? No. She ran out of her hiding place, and the screaming monster, leaping out of the water, met the frying pan coming the other way with a clang. It was a good clang, the mark of a clang well done. The creature hung there for a moment, a few teeth and bits of green weed splashing into the water. Then slowly it slid down and sank.
"One sweeties!"
Wentworth screamed. Tiffany undid the string, gave them to him, waited until he was sick, then went back home in a thoughtful state of mind. In the reeds, small voices whispered,
"Criven's wee Bobby, did you no see that? Aye, we better off ski and tell the big man we've found the hag."
Miss Tick was running up the dusty road, a tent on her back.
"It had all those teeth,"
said the mystery voice, this time from her hat.
"I know, and she hit it just like that. Yes, very impressive. Impressive, she used her brother as bait. Yes, amazing, wasn't it? Such quick thinking. Oh, no."
Miss Tick stopped running as a wave of dizziness hit her.
"What? What?" "It's this wretched chalk. I can feel it. I can do magic on honest soil or rock, but I don't have much power on chalk." "You can't do magic here?" "No."
Then Miss Tick looked up at the sounds of jingling. A strange procession, made up mostly of donkeys pulling small brightly painted carts, was coming up the white road, and people were walking alongside the carts, mostly men wearing bright robes. Each one of them wore a strange black square hat, and Miss Tick smiled. They looked like tinkers, but there wasn't one among them she knew who could mend a kettle. What they did was sell invisible things, and after they'd sold what they had, they still had it. They sold the key to the universe to people who didn't even know it was locked.
"Well, I can't do," said Miss Tick, "but I can teach."
For the rest of the morning, Tiffany worked in the dairy because the farm was big and everyone had their jobs to do, and Tiffany did hers very well. She was the dairymaid, and she made better butter than her mother did, and people would comment on how good she was with cheese. It was a talent. Sometimes, when the wandering teachers came to the village, She went to get a bit of education, but mostly she worked in the dairy, which was dark and cool. She enjoyed it. For lunch there was bread and jam, and her mother said, "The teachers are coming to town today. You can go if you've done your chores." And Tiffany agreed that yes, there were some things she'd like to know more about. "Then you can have half a dozen carrots and an egg." So Tiffany went to get an egg's worth of education. People were usually quite pleased to see the teachers in their ragged robes and strange square hats, although they always had to be out of the village by nightfall in case they stole chickens. They used long words like corrugated iron, lived mostly on baked hedgehog, and slept under the stars, which the maths teachers would count, the astronomy teachers measure, and the literature teachers name. The geography teachers got lost in the woods and fell into bear traps. Today their brightly coloured booths and tents were pitched in a field outside the village. The first tent Tiffany saw had a sign which said, "Geography, Geography, Geography. Today only, all major land masses and oceans, plus everything you need to know about glaciers. 1 penny or all major vegetables accepted." The next along was decorated with scenes from history, generally of kings cutting one another's heads off. The teacher aimed a small megaphone at Tiffany. "The death of kings through the ages. Lots of blood. You've got to know where you come from, otherwise how will you know where you're going?" "I come from a long line of Achings," said Tiffany, "and I think I'm moving on." She found what she was looking for at a booth hung with pictures of animals. Its sign said, "Useful creatures. Today, our friend the hedgehog." The teacher was standing out front. "Hello, little girl," he said, which was his first mistake. "I'm sure you want to know all about hedgehogs, eh?" "I did this one last summer." The man's grin faded. "Oh, yes, I remember. You asked all those questions." "And I'd like a question answered today." "Well, provided it's not about how you get baby hedgehogs." "No, it's about zoology." "Zoology, eh? That's a big word, isn't it?" "No, it isn't, actually. Patronizing is a big word." The teacher's eyes narrowed. "Any particular animal?" "Jenny Greenteeth, a water-dwelling monster with big teeth and claws and eyes like soup plates." "What size soup plates?" 8 inches across, I checked." Don't think I know that one." "Try her, she's new." The teacher jerked his thumb towards a small tent at the end of the row. It was black and quite shabby. "What does she teach?" Tiffany asked. "Couldn't say. She says it's thinking, but I don't see how you teach that. Right, 1 carrot, thank you." When she went closer, Tiffany saw a very small notice pinned to the outside of the tent. It said, "I can teach you a lesson you won't forget in a hurry." Tiffany smiled. There was nothing to knock on, so she said, "Knock, knock." From within, a woman's voice said, "Who's there?" "Tiffany." "Tiffany who?" "Tiffany, who isn't trying to make a joke." "Ah, come in." Tiffany pushed aside the flap. A skinny figure was sitting behind a small table. She had a very sharp, thin nose, and was wearing a large black straw hat with paper flowers on it. "Are you a witch?" Tiffany said. "What a strange question. You know your Baron bans witches in this country." "Well, you are wearing black." "Anyone can wear black." "And a straw hat with flowers in it?" "Ha ha ha! Foolish child. Everyone knows witches wear tall, pointy hats." "Yes, but witches are also clever. A witch coming here would know about the Baron, so she'd wear the kind of hat everyone knows witches don't wear." The woman stared.
You know you'd make a good witch-finder. Whatever hat I've got on, you'd say it proves I'm a witch, yes?
Well, the frog sitting on it's a bit of a clue, too.
A toad, actually,
said the creature which had been peering at her from between the paper flowers. There was a pause, while the woman appeared to make her mind up.
All right, yes, I am a witch. My name is Miss Tick. A good name for a witch.
You mean a blood-sucking parasite?
I'm sorry. Ticks. Sheep get them. But if you use turpentine, I meant it sounds like mystic.
Oh, a pun or play on words. Tiffany had read lots of words in the dictionary, but often had to guess how they were pronounced. But are you really a witch?
Oh, please. I have a talking animal, a tendency to correct other people's pronunciation. It's pun, by the way, not pun. And yes, a pointy hat. Can I operate the spring now?
Said the toad.
Yes.
There was a click, a slow thwap, thwap, and the centre of the hat rose jerkily upwards out of the paper flowers. With a last thwap, the top made a perfect point.
And you, too, want to be a witch, am I right? You probably want to fly on a broomstick, yes?
Oh, yes.
Oh, really? You really like having to wear 2 pairs of really, really thick woolen pants? Believe me, it can get cold up there.
But can't you use a keeping warm spell?
I could. But a witch doesn't do that sort of thing. Witches don't use magic unless they really have to. A witch uses her head, pays attention to everything that's going on, sees through things and round things and further than most. And a witch would see Jenny Greenteeth. So, what happened?
How did you know I saw Jenny Greenteeth?
I'm a witch. Guess.
Tiffany looked around the gloomy tent. There wasn't much to see, but the sounds of the outside world filtered through the heavy material. You heard me telling the teacher?
Correct. I just used my ears.
She said nothing about saucers of ink.
Now, tell me about this monster. Where do soup plates come in?
The monster's in a storybook I've got. It says Jenny Greenteeth has eyes the size of soup plates, so I measured one to be exact, 8 inches. Miss Tick put her chin on her hand and gave an odd sort of smile.
Go on.
So Tiffany told her about the fight with Jenny.
Tell me, why the frying pan? You could have found a stick.
The frying pan seemed better.
It was. If you'd used a stick, Jenny would have eaten you up, but a frying pan is made of iron. Creatures of that kidney can't stand iron.
But it's a monster out of a storybook. What's it doing in our little river? Miss Tick paused.
Tiffany, why do you want to be a witch?
Well, it had started with the Good Child's Book of Fairy Tales. All the stories had a witch somewhere, a wicked old witch, and Tiffany had thought, but where's the evidence? Why was she wicked? The stories never gave you the evidence of anything. They didn't want you to think, they only wanted you to believe what you were told, and you were told that the old witch lived all by herself in a strange cottage made of gingerbread, or which ran around on giant hen's feet, and she talked to animals and could do magic. Well, Tiffany only ever knew one old woman who lived all alone in a strange house that moved about, and that was Granny Aching, and there was nothing wicked about her. And besides, she preferred the witches to the smug princes and the stupid smirking princesses who didn't have the sense of a beetle. They had lovely golden hair too, and Tiffany didn't. Hers was plain brown as earth. And if you had brown hair, you were a servant or a woodcutter or a dairymaid. Well, that was not going to happen, even if she was good at cheese. She couldn't be the prince, and she'd never be a princess. so she'd be the witch and know things like Granny Aching. "Who was Granny Aching?" said a voice. Who was Granny Aching? Granny Aching was there, always there. Down in the village decisions were made, things were done, and life went on in the knowledge that in her old wheeled shepherding hut on the hills, Granny Aching was there, watching. She was the silence of the hills. Perhaps that's why, in her awkward, hesitant way, she liked Tiffany. Granny didn't like noise, and Tiffany didn't make any noise when she was up at the hut. She'd watch the buzzards and listen to the silence. Granny Aching wrapped the silence around herself and made room inside it for Tiffany. Granny Aching listened all the time.
"What?"
said Tiffany, blinking.
"You said Granny Aching listened to me all the time."
Tiffany swallowed.
"I think my grandmother was slightly a witch." "Really?" "Well, she talked to her dogs. Witches have animals they can talk to, called familiars, like your toad." "I'm not familiar,"
said a voice from among the paper flowers.
"Only slightly presumptuous."
"And she knew about all kinds of herbs. She could cure anything. My father said she could make a shepherd's pie stand up and bar." "She could bring lambs back to life." Granny Aching spent most of the year sleeping in the old wheeled hut which could be dragged across the downs after the flocks. The first time Tiffany could remember seeing the old woman in the farmhouse, she was kneeling in front of the fire, putting a dead lamb in the oven. Tiffany had screamed, and Granny had awkwardly picked her up, sat her on her lap, and called her, "My little Jigget." Jigget, Tiffany found out, meant 20 in the Yantan-Tethera, the ancient counting language of the shepherds, and she was Granny Aching's 20th grandchild. When she'd stopped screaming, Granny had put her down, opened the oven, and Tiffany had watched the lamb come alive again. When she was older, she learnt that the warming oven was just the place to revive a weak lamb that was near death from cold, no magic at all. But that time it had been magic. It didn't stop being magic just because you found out how it was done.
"Good," said Miss Tick, "but still not exactly witchcraft. Anyway, you don't have to have a witch ancestor to be a witch, though it does help, of course."
"You mean like having talents?"
"Well, partly, I suppose. But I was thinking, if you have someone to pass on her pointy hat, that saves a great deal of expense. They are incredibly hard to come by."
"Did Mrs. Aching have anything like that?"
"I don't think so.
She wore an old grain sack as a sort of hood. But she'd have done something about monsters in our river. And she'd have done something about old Mrs. Snapperly, too, she thought. She'd have spoken up, and people would have listened. They always listened when Granny spoke up.
"Speak up for those who don't have voices,"
she always said.
"Tell me, Tiffany, before Jenny leapt up, was there a susurrus?"
Tiffany beamed. "Yes, there certainly was."
"Ah, something bad is happening."
Tiffany looked worried. "Can I stop it?"
"Now I'm impressed. You said, 'Can I stop it?' Not 'Can anyone stop it?' That's good. You accept responsibility. But no, you can't."
"I walloped Jenny Greenteeth."
"Lucky hit, and there may be worse than her on the way. I believe an incursion of major proportions is going to start here. I'll try to fetch help, but you must stay clear. Are there no witches here at all?"
Tiffany hesitated. "There was old Mrs. Snapperly." "Oh, yes, she lived all alone in a strange cottage, all right."
"Can't say I've heard the name. Where is she?"
"She died in the snow last winter."
"And now tell me what you're not telling me."
She was begging, but no one opened their doors to her."
"And she was a witch, was she?"
"Everyone said so."
But you don't think so. Well, you see, the Baron had a son, Roland. He was only 12, and last summer he went riding in the woods, and his dogs came back without him. And Mrs. Snapperly lived in those woods? Yes. And people think she killed him, cooked him in the oven or something? Something like that, yes. Mrs. Snapperly had a really big oven, eh? No, only 10 inches deep. But I bet she had no teeth and talked to herself, right? Yes, and she had a cat and a squint. Then it all came out in a rush, and after Roland vanished they went to her cottage, threw stones at a cat till it died, turned her out of her cottage and burnt it to the ground. So next day I went there and buried her cat. You buried the cat? Yes, someone had to. And you measured the oven too? Well, yes, it didn't make any sense. I mean, it was tiny. And she only looked like a witch in a story. I think she was just a sick old lady who looked odd and smelt a bit. Anyone with half a mind could see that. Yes. But sometimes it's hard to find half a mind when you need one. Can you teach me what I need to know to be a witch? Tell me, why do you still want to be one after what happened to Mrs. Snapperly? So that sort of thing doesn't happen again. What kind of child is this? Thought Miss Tick. Good answer, she said, but I don't teach people to be witches. I teach people about witches. Witches learn in a special school. I only show them the way. There's really a school for witches? In a manner of speaking. Where? That will be 1 egg, please. Tiffany handed over the egg. Exactly where can I find the school? Aha! A root vegetable question. 2 carrots, please. Tiffany handed them over. Thank you. Now, ready? To find the school for witches, go to the top of a high place near here. Open your eyes. Yes. And then open your eyes again. But got any more eggs? No, but no more education then. But I do have a question to ask you. Got any eggs? Ah. Did you see anything else by the river, Tiffany? Silence suddenly filled the tent. Tiffany and Miss Tick stared into one another's eyes. No. Sure? Yes. They continued the staring match, but Tiffany could outstare a cat. I see. Very well. Miss Tick stood up. I hope we meet again. I will give you some free advice, though. Are you listening? Yes? Good. Now, if you trust in yourself, yes, and believe in your dreams, yes, and follow your star, yes, you'll get beaten by people who spend their time working hard, learning things, and weren't so lazy. Goodbye. On her way home, Tiffany wondered if she should have mentioned the little red-haired men. But it was nice to have something Miss Tick didn't know. Yes, in Tiffany's opinion, Miss Tick was a bit too clever. And she wondered what the school for witches would be like, and why she hadn't seen it yet, because she knew every inch of the country around the farm. There were no secret places she didn't know about. But then maybe there were magical doors. That's what she'd make if she had a magical school. There'd be secret doorways everywhere. So she climbed to the top of Arkan Hill, which wasn't very big, not as high as the Downs, and nothing like as high as the mountains beyond them. This hill was more homely. Then she closed her eyes, opened them, blinked, and opened them again. But there was no magic door. No hidden building revealed, no strange signs. For a moment, though, the air buzzed and smelt of snow. When she got home, Tiffany looked up incursion in the dictionary.
It meant invasion. An incursion of major proportions, Miss Tick had said. And now little unseen eyes watched her from the top of the shelf. Miss Tick removed her hat, reached inside, and pulled a piece of string. With little flapping noises, the hat again took the shape of a rather elderly straw hat.
"Phew,"
she said.
"She's clearly got first sight and second thoughts," said the toad. "That's a powerful combination." "Yes. Ever heard the saying, 'The land finds its witch'? I'll bet it's happened here." "But a chalk witch. Do you know what chalk is?" "You're going to tell me." "It's the shells of billions and billions of tiny, helpless sea creatures that died millions of years ago. It's tiny, tiny bones, soft, soggy, damp. She's grown up on chalk, and she is hard and sharp, too. A born witch. But she'll need more than that. There'll be much, much worse than Jenny." "Then you should stay and help her." "But I've practically no power here." She picked up the toad. "And you know what'll be turning up here? All the things that give children nightmares, all the monsters from under the biggest bed in the world. Somewhere all stories are real and all dreams come true, and they'll come true here if they're not stopped. Listen, I'm going to get help, but it'll take me at least 2 days without a broomstick." "It's unfair to leave her alone." "She won't be alone. She'll have you." "Oh,"
said the toad. Tiffany shared a bedroom with Fastidia and Hannah. She lay in the dark that night and heard their breathing settle as they began dreaming of young sheep shearers with their shirts off. Outside, summer lightning flashed around the hills, and there was a rumble of thunder. Thunder and lightning. She knew them as dogs before she knew them as the sound and light of a storm. Granny always had her sheepdogs with her, indoors and out. And she thought of Granny's light, weaving slowly across the downs in storms like a raging war, or on freezing sparkly nights, saving lambs from the creeping frost or rams from the precipice. She froze and struggled and tramped through the night for idiot sheep that never said thank you and would probably be just as stupid tomorrow and get into the same trouble again. But she did it because not doing it was unthinkable. Tiffany must have slept because she woke up hearing voices. They seemed very close and somehow very small.
"Cribbins, it's a very well saying find the hag. But what are we looking for? All these big jobs look the same to me." "Not jolly wee Geordie doon at the fishing said she was a big girl. A great help, that is. They're all big girls."
"Hello," Tiffany whispered. The little man in the river had talked like that. There was a silence, the silence of people trying hard not to make any noise. She leant down and looked under the bed. There was nothing there but the gazunder. She lay back in the moonlight, listening until her ears ached.
"Is the bairn asleep? I canna hear her moving."
Tiffany opened her eyes in the darkness. The voices under the bed had a slightly echoey edge now. Thank goodness the gazunder was clean.
"Right, let's get to this wee port then. Aye, I'm off-ski."
Silence fell again, and this time it was the silence of no one there, rather than the silence of people being incredibly quiet. Then Tiffany got out of bed, crept downstairs, fished the fairy tales book off Granny's shelf, lifted the latch on the back door, and stepped out into the warm night. There was some mist around, but stars were visible overhead, and there was a gibbous moon. She knew it was gibbous because she'd read it in the almanac. The three-holer privy was where everyone in the family went if they wanted to be private for a while. There was a candle in there, and last year's almanac on a string. The printers knew their readership and printed it on soft, thin paper. She lit the candle, made herself comfortable, and opened the book of fairy tales. She'd never really liked the book. It seemed to her that it always tried to tell her what to do, what to think. Don't stray from the path, don't open that door, hate the witch. Oh, and shoe size is a good way of choosing a wife. No, a lot of the stories were highly suspicious. Why should some boy too stupid to know a cow's worth a lot more than 5 beans have the right to murder a giant and steal his gold? Not to mention commit an act of ecological vandalism. And some girl who can't tell the difference between a wolf and her grandmother must be either as dense as teak or come from an extremely ugly family. No, the stories weren't real. Yet Mrs. Snapperly had died because of stories. But if the stories made her angry, the pictures were beautiful. She flicked through the pages looking for the right picture. And suddenly there it was. Most pictures of fairies weren't very impressive. They looked frankly like a small girl's ballet class that had just had to run through a bramble patch. But this one was different. The colours were strange. There were no shadows. Giant grasses and daisies grew everywhere, so the fairies must have been quite small, but they looked big, like rather strange humans. Hardly any of them had wings, and they were odd shapes. In fact, some of them looked like monsters. And the odd thing was that alone of all the pictures in the book, this one looked as if the artist had been there. She concentrated on the bottom left-hand corner, and there it was, a little red-haired man, naked except for a kilt and a skinny waistcoat, scowling out of the picture, and definitely making a rude gesture with his hand. Then she heard voices. Gently she pushed the door open. The sound was coming from the other side of the hedge, where there was a field full of sheep waiting to go to market. Sheep are not known for their conversation. She snuck out in the misty dawn and looked through a small gap. There was a ram grazing near the hedge, and the conversation was coming from the long grass underneath it.
"Crivens, we want a coo beastie, not a sheep. Ach, one's as good as t'other. Come on, lads. I grab a leg. Keep it down, will ya? Ach, who's listening? OK, lads. Jan, Dan, Dadra."
The sheep rose a little in the air and bleated in alarm as it went across the field backwards into the mist. Now Tiffany heard noises from the hen-house. She ran through the garden and flung open the door. There were no flying feathers, but the chickens were clucking excitedly, and one hen looked a bit embarrassed. Quickly Tiffany lifted it up. There were 2 tiny blue, red-haired men underneath, each clasping an egg in his arms.
"Ach, no,"
said one.
"it's the bairn. She's the hag."
"How dare you? I'm not a hag, and you're stealing our eggs."
"What eggs?"
"The eggs you're holding."
"What, these?"
"Put them back." The second one nudged the first one.
"Best day," she says. "This one dinged Johnny." "Aye, I didn't think."
Very carefully the tiny men put the eggs back. One made a show of polishing his with the ragged edge of his kilt.
"Nae harm done, mistress."
Then he looked at the other man. There was a red blur in the air, and they vanished. "And I'm a mess," Tiffany shouted. "I'm not a hag. And what about our ship? I mean, sheep." No answer. After breakfast, Tiffany ran back out into the paddock and looked through the hedge. "If that sheep doesn't come back this minute, there will be a reckoning." She heard the sound of small voices.
"What did the hag say?" "She said there'd be a reckoning." "Oh, waily, 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 we're in trouble now." Tiffany turned, face red with anger.
"We have a duty," she said. It was something Granny Aching had once said to her.
"We are as gods to beasts of the field, my jigget. We order the time of their birth and the time of their death. Between times we have a duty."
"We have a duty," she repeated, glaring around the field. "If that sheep doesn't come back, whoever you are, there will be trouble." Suddenly there was a sound of bleating. The sheep was coming back, backwards and at high speed. It jerked to a halt and dropped down. Suddenly a little red-headed man appeared on its head, polished a horn with his kilt, then vanished in a blur. And Tiffany thought, I really think I need a whole egg's worth of education in a hurry. It was later that day, when Tiffany was halfway down the steep track from the farm to the village, that the susurrus started. The hedges rustled without a wind. The larks stopped singing and the air went cold. When she looked up at the sky, it sparkled like looking through a diamond. Then there was snow underfoot, snow on the hedges, and the sound of galloping hooves. There was a moment of silence, and a horse landed in the lane, skidding on the snow. It pulled itself upright, and the rider turned it to face Tiffany. The rider himself couldn't face her. He had no face. He had no head to hang it on. Tiffany ran, her boots slipping on the snow. She could hear a breathy whistling noise behind her, and a whinny from the horse. It was coming after her, steam pouring off it. If only she thought she'd brought the frying pan. Ahead of her, the lane passed under an arch of trees. Flakes of snow dropped on her as she passed under them.
"Here we hag! Stand it ye still, right noo!"
A tiny blue man had poked his head out of the snow. "There's a headless horseman after me."
"Stand ye still, hinny! Look him in the eye!"
"He hasn't got any eyes."
"Crivens, are ye a hag or no? Look him in the eyes he hasn't got."
The blue man disappeared, and Tiffany turned. The horseman was trotting towards her. He'd a sword in his hand, and there was the breathy noise again. Not good. But the little men were watching, and Granny Aching wouldn't have run from a thing with no head. She folded her arms and glared. The horseman urged the horse forward. Suddenly a blue and red shape dropped from the trees, landing on the horse's forehead between its eyes. He grabbed an ear in both hands.
"Here's a face full of dandruff for ye, yer bogle, courtesy of Big Yan."
Then the man hit the horse between the eyes with his head. The horse staggered, its legs slid from under it, and it collapsed in the snow. Little blue men erupted from the hedge. The horseman disappeared under a storm of screaming creatures and vanished. The snow vanished. The horse vanished. For a moment the blue men were in a pile on the hot, dusty road. One said,
"Oh, I kicked myself in me ain heed."
Then they too vanished into the hedge. Suddenly the larks were back. The hedges were green and full of flowers. The sky was blue. Tiffany looked down, and on her boots snow was melting. She was strangely glad of that. It meant that what had just happened was magical, not madness. But what she needed right now was answers. The tents had gone. Except for a few broken pieces of chalk, apple cores, and, alas, a few chicken feathers, there was nothing to show the teachers had ever been there. A small voice said, "Shh." Tiffany looked down. A toad crept out from under a dock leaf.
"Miss Tig said you'd be back. There are things you need to know, right?"
"Everything. We're swamped with tiny men who keep calling me a hag."
"Ah, yes. You've got Nac Mac Feegles."
"Then it snowed, and I was chased by a horseman with no—" "What did you say they were?"
"Nac Mac Feegles, also known as Pixies."
"Pixies?"
"Not pixies, Pixies. They call themselves the Wee Free Men.
Well, one of them head-butted a horse.
Ah, sounds like a Feegle.
Are they from the same place as Jenny?
No, they're rebels.
Rebels? Against who?
Everyone. Anything. Now, pick me up.
Why?
Because there's a woman over there giving you a funny look. Put me in your apron pocket, for goodness sake.
Tiffany snatched up the toad and smiled at the woman. I'm making a collection of pressed toads. Yes, that's nice, dear. The woman hurried away.
That wasn't very funny,
said the toad from her apron. Tiffany took it out again. Look, what's going on, Toad? Is it the Feegles who are invading? The toad looked a bit shifty.
Miss Tick doesn't want you to handle this,
it said.
She'll be back soon with help. Some other witches.
She going to be in time?
I don't know.
Well, you'd better tell me what you know.
Miss Tick thinks another world is colliding with this one, but it's happening faster than she expected. All the monsters are coming back.
Why?
There's no one to stop them.
There was silence for a moment. There's me, said Tiffany. Nothing happened on the way back to the farm. The sky stayed blue, and an air of hot emptiness lay over everything. They went into the dairy, and Tiffany carefully put the toad on the table. Some milk?
You're very kind.
Tiffany fetched some and poured it into a saucer. She watched the toad crawl in. Were you a handsome prince once?
Yeah, maybe.
Who put a spell on you?
A fairy godmother. Never cross a woman with a star on a stick. They've got a mean streak.
Why did she do it?
I don't know. It's all a bit foggy. I think I've got 1 or 2 memories of being a human, but what's a memory after all? Only a thought in your brain. You can't be sure it's real.
Then suddenly, through the window, Tiffany saw her mother hurrying down the path. Quickly, she put the toad back into her apron pocket as the door was flung open. Where's Wentworth? Her mother asked urgently. Did he come back here? Answer me! Didn't he go up to the shearing with you, Mum? Tiffany was suddenly nervous. She could feel the panic pouring off her mother like smoke. Yes, but we can't find him, and I only turned my back for a minute. Mrs. Aching hurried away. Tiffany could hear boots in the yard as some of the men came down from the shearing sheds. She heard her father say, Try down by the river. He sounded frantic too. And it's all your fault. The thought felt like a piece of ice in Tiffany's mind. Your fault because you didn't love him very much. When he turned up, you weren't the youngest anymore, and he was a nuisance with a permanently runny nose. He never did what he was told, and you had to have him trailing around after you. You kept wishing, didn't you, that he'd go away. No, that's not true, Tiffany whispered to herself. I quite liked him. Then the dairy door burst open again, and her father stood there. Tiffany looked up guiltily. Well, girl, go and do something. Yes, Dad. When the door had shut, Tiffany took the toad out. Listen, this is urgent. My little brother's gone missing in broad daylight. Oh, rope. Pardon? That's swearing in toad. Why? Has what's going on got something to do with magic? I hope not, but I think so. Have those little men stolen Wentworth? Not the Feegles. They don't steal children. There was something in the way the toad said it. They don't steal. Who has taken my brother, then? Miss Tick said you were not to... My brother's been stolen. You expect me not to do anything? No, but... Good. Where are the Feegles now? Lying low, I expect. The place is full of people. How can I bring them back? That's something not many people have ever wanted to do. If you get Nac Mac Feegles in the house, it's usually best to move away. I need them. Is your father a drinking man? He has some beer. Only beer?
Well, for special occasions, there's what my father calls the special sheep liniment that Granny Aching used to make in the cowshed. Strong, is it? It dissolves spoons, and father says it's not for women because it puts hairs on your chest. Good. Fetch some.
Minutes later, Tiffany returned with a bottle. She went to pour some of the liquid into a saucer.
Now we'll be trampled to death. Just leave the cork off.
Fumes rose from the bottle, making Tiffany's eyes water. Then she felt it, a sensation in the dim, cool room of riveted attention. She sat down on a milking stool.
"All right, you can come out now."
And they came from behind buckets. They lowered themselves on string from the ceiling beams. They sidled from behind cheese racks and crept from under the sink. There were hundreds of them. They were all about 6 inches tall, and blue tattoos covered every inch of their skins that wasn't covered with red hair. They wore short kilts, and some had feathers in their hair and necklaces of mole teeth. Every single one carried, slung across his back, a sword nearly as big as he was. However, what Tiffany noticed most was that they seemed scared of her. No one wanted to look her in the eye. She glared at them.
"Why did you steal the sheep?"
There was much muttering and nudging. Then one tiny man wearing a rabbit skull helmet removed it and twiddled it nervously in his hands.
"We was hungering, mistress, but when we kenned the beastie was thine, we did put it back."
They looked so crestfallen, Tiffany took pity on them. "So you wouldn't have stolen if you weren't so hungry then?" There were several hundred astonished looks.
"Oh, yes, we have to. We're a famously stealing folk, aren't we, lads? Tell the hag what we're famous for." "Stealing!"
shouted the blue men.
"And what else?" "Fighting!" "And what else?" "Drinking!" "Tell the wee hag who we are, lads."
There was the scrape of many small swords being drawn and thrust into the air.
"Nac Mac Feegle, the wee free men, nae king, nae queen, nae master, we will not be fooled again."
Tiffany stared, and the longer she did, the more worried they became. They lowered their swords.
"But we wouldn't have dared deny a powerful hag, except maybe for strong drink."
The helmet twiddler's eyes were on the bottle of special sheep liniment.
"Will you no help us?"
"Help you? I need you to help me. Someone's taken my baby brother."
"Oh, wheelie, wheelie, wheelie. She's come then. It's the queen. She's come a-fetching."
His voice became lost in the wails and groans of the Nac Mac Feegle. They pulled at their hair and stamped on the ground, shouting,
"Alack-a-dee!"
and
"Wheelie, wheelie, wheelie."
Tiffany stood up. "Everybody, shut up right now." Silence fell, except for a few sniffs and faint wailies from the back.
"If the Gwen is here, mistress, then it means our gelder is weakening fast. We'll ha' nae one to look after us."
To look after us, thought Tiffany. Hundreds of tough little men who could each win the worst broken nose contest need someone to look after them? She pointed to the helmet twiddler. "You, what's your name?" A gasp went up, and she heard one of the Nac Mac Feegle murmur,
"Aye, she's the hag right enough. That's a hag's question."
The helmet twiddler looked very worried.
"We dinna give our names, mistress," he muttered.
But another Feegle at the back said,
"Whist, ye canna refuse a hag."
The little man looked up.
"Weel, I'm the big man of the clan, mistress. My name is Rob Anybody, but I beg ye dinna use it agin me." "They think names have magic in them," murmured the toad. "They don't tell them to people in case they're written down." "Aye, and put on documents," said a Feegle. "Aye, summonses and such," said another. "Or wanted posters," said another. And they think written words are even more powerful magic, whispered the toad. See their swords? They glow blue in the presence of lawyers. Aye, a body can be put in the prison if they have written evidence, said another.
All right, said Tiffany. I promise not to write his name down. Now tell me about the Queen who's taken Wentworth. Queen of what?
Can he speak it aloud, mistress? Said Rob Anybody. She hears her name. She comes calling.
Actually, that's true, said the toad, and you don't want to meet her, ever. She's bad? Worse. Tiffany saw that Rob Anybody was looking at her with bright, worried eyes.
Ye dinna ken the Queen? And you the ween of Granny Aching, ye dinna ken the ways, did she no show ye?
Tiffany swallowed. She never told me about any magic, she began, but Granny Aching had showed people magic every day. There was a time when the Baron's champion hound was caught killing sheep. There were laws on the chalk, and everyone knew that sheep-killing dogs were killed. But the Baron had walked to Granny Aching's hut and pleaded for the life of his dog.
"Bring ye siller, bring ye gilt," said Granny Aching.
"No silver, no gold," said the Baron.
"Good. A law that is break by siller or gilt is no worthwhile law. Ye try to break the law with a word."
"That's right, Granny Aching."
"Then be down at the little old stone barn at dawn tomorrow, and there will be reckoning."
The next morning Granny Aching arrived with a ewe and her new-born lamb. She put them in the barn. Some men turned up with the dog, and when the Baron rode up, Granny Aching opened the barn door, and the dog was thrown inside. There was the bleating of the lamb, a growl from the dog, and then a baa from the lamb's mother. It wasn't a normal baa, it had an edge to it. Something hit the door and it bounced on its hinges. Inside, the dog yelped, as 70 pounds of enraged sheep slammed into it like a battering ram. Granny Aching puffed peacefully on her pipe, as the building behind her shook and the dog yelped and whimpered. Finally the dog came out, limping on 3 legs.
"He'll mend,"
said Granny Aching.
"but he won't look at a sheep again, you have my thumb on that."
And she licked her right thumb and held it out. After a moment's hesitation, the Baron licked his thumb and pressed it against hers. Everyone knew what it meant. On the chalk, a thumb bargain was unbreakable.
"For you, at a word, the law was break," said Granny Aching. "Will ye mind that, ye who sit in judgment?"
The Baron nodded to her, and their thumbs parted. One day Tiffany heard her father say, "'Twas an old shepherd's trick. An old ewe will fight like a lion for her lamb." That was how it worked. No magic at all. But it didn't stop being magic just because you found out how it was done. The Feegles were watching Tiffany carefully, with occasional longing glances at the bottle. "I haven't even found the witch's school," she thought. "I don't know a single spell, and I don't understand half of what these little men are saying. But they do know who's taken my brother." "I remember a lot of things about Granny Aching," she said. "What do you want me to do?"
"Weel, the Kelder sent us. She sensed the Queen coming and kenned there was going to be trouble, so she told us, find the new hag who's kin to Granny Aching, and she'll ken what to do."
Tiffany looked at the hundreds of expectant faces. "And will you help me get my brother back from the Queen?" Their expressions didn't change. "All right. Can you help me steal my brother back?"
"Ach, no, you're talking our language,"
said Rob. Tiffany put the cork back into the bottle, and the Nac Mac Feegles sighed. Then she darted back into the kitchen, found a sack, took some things from the medicine box, added the bottle of special sheep liniment, and picked up the frying pan. Then she went back to the dairy. She looked at Rob Anybody. "Tell me, why didn't you come and ask me right at the start?
We didn't ken who we were looking for, mistress. Lots of big job women around this farm. We didn't ken it was thee until you caught Daft Wally.
Yes, but stealing the sheep and the eggs, there was no need for that.
There wasn't nail doon.
You can't nail down an egg.
Ach, weel, you'll hear the kenning of that, mistress. Anyhow, we'd best be going. You hear, Besom?
Broomstick, murmured the toad. No.
Fair enough. Daft Wally, come here.
One of that morning's egg thieves came and stood by Rob.
If you'd care to step on us, mistress.
Before Tiffany could say anything, the toad said out of the corner of its mouth, which, being a toad's, was quite a lot of corner, "One Feegle can lift a grown man." Cautiously, Tiffany raised a big boot. Daft Wally ran underneath it.
"No, t'other."
"But I'll fall over."
"Nay, we're good at this."
Then Tiffany was standing on 2 Pixies. She felt quite secure. It was just like wearing really thick soles.
"Right, let's gee!"
Tiffany flew a few inches above the ground, standing still. Wind rushed around her as the Feegles sped out of the farmyard gate and up onto the turf of the downs. This is the girl flying, and there's a toad on her head, holding on to her hair. Pull back, and here is the long green whale-back of the downs. Now she's a pale blue dot against the endless grass. But the green sea isn't unbroken. Here and there humans have been. For in the chalk, the softest of rocks formed under water millions of years ago from tiny seashells, you also found flints, harder than steel. The old people called these calkins, which meant chalk children. And to Tiffany they'd always seemed odd, as if the stone were striving to come alive. You could look at a flint and see almost anything, a face, a strange animal, a sea monster, as though the chalk had been trying to make the shapes of living creatures. And in the olden days, men had dug for the flint, and they were still there, the deep pits in the rolling green, filled with thickets of thorn and brambles. But there weren't just the pits. Men had been everywhere on the chalk. There were stone circles half fallen down, and burial mounds, and odd carvings of horses and giants. There were signs of people everywhere. The chalk had been important. And now Tiffany was properly up on the downs. On either side of her the Feegles ran in a ragged line, staring grimly ahead. Only the occasional sheep baa or buzzard scream disturbed a busy silence made up of bee buzzes, breezes, and the sound of a ton of grass growing every minute. She saw a landmark ahead. There were always a few sheep here. Strays would turn up here, and lambs would find their way to it when they'd lost their mothers. This was a magic place. But there wasn't much to see, only the iron wheels sinking into the turf, and the pot-bellied stove with its short chimney. On the day Granny Aching died, the men had cut and lifted the turf around her hut and dug a deep hole 6 feet deep, lifting out the chalk in great damp blocks. Her sheepdogs, Thunder and Lightning, had watched carefully, but they didn't whine. They seemed more interested than upset. Granny Aching had been wrapped in a woolen blanket with a tuft of raw wool pinned to it. That was to tell the gods that the person being buried there was a shepherd. Though it had to be said, Granny Aching had never been seen to pray to anything in her life. Even now it was agreed she wouldn't have had any time for a god who didn't understand that lambing came first. The chalk had been put back over her, and Granny Aching, who'd always said the hills were in her bones, now had her bones in the hills. Then they'd burned the hut, and with great care put the turf back, so all that was left to see were the hut's iron wheels on their axles and the pot-bellied stove. At which point, so everyone said, the sheepdogs had looked up, their ears pricking, and had trotted away, never to be seen again. The Pixies carrying Tiffany slowed down and gently dropped her onto the turf, which had healed now. "Where are we stopping here?" she said.
Got to wait for Hamish, mistress, said Rob.
Who's Hamish?
He might have the knowing of where the Queen went with your wee laddie.
Tiffany saw that all the Feegles were staring intently upwards, so, puzzled, she sat on one of the rusty wheels and looked at the sky too. There were a few clouds, and nothing else except the distant circling buzzards. There were always buzzards over the chalk. The shepherds had taken to calling them Granny Aching's chickens, and clouds like today's Granny's little lambs. And it was also said that some shepherds, if wolves were troublesome in winter or a prize ewe had got lost, would go to the site of the old hut and leave an ounce of jolly sailor tobacco there, just in case. Tiffany hesitated. "I want that to be true," she whispered to herself. "I want to know that other people think she hasn't really gone too." Then she looked under the rusted wheel rim, and yes, there was a brightly coloured little packet lying there. She picked it up, and it looked quite fresh. There was the jolly sailor on the front, with his big grin, big yellow rain hat and big beard, with the big blue waves crashing behind him. And there, too, was the lighthouse in the sea, which was to stop boats crashing into the rocks. In the picture, the beam of the big light was a brilliant white. Tiffany had often dreamt about that, and woken up with the roar of the sea in her ears. Carefully she pulled the label off the packet and sniffed at it. Yes, it was the smell. Granny Aching smelled of sheep turpentine and jolly sailor tobacco. The three smells mixed together to become one smell, which to Tiffany was the smell of the chalk. It followed Granny Aching like a cloud. It meant warmth and silence and a space around which the whole world revolved. As she was putting the label in her pocket, a shadow passed overhead. A buzzard was diving down towards the Feegles. She leapt up. "Run! It'll kill you!" They turned and looked at her as though she'd gone mad.
"Ach, dinna fuss yoursel," said
Rob. At the bottom of its dive, the bird curved up and a dot dropped from it. As it fell, it seemed to grow 2 wings and spin like a sycamore bract. And still spinning madly, a pixie hit the turf a few feet away.
"Good landing, Hamish," said Rob. "The spinning certainly slows you down."
Hamish got up slowly. He had a pair of goggles over his eyes and was untying 2 thin bits of wood from his arms.
"I dinna think I can tak much more of this," he said.
"How can you survive that?" Tiffany asked. The very small pilot tried to look her up and down, but only managed to look her up and further up.
"I allus make sure I land on my head."
He turned to rob anybody.
"Who's the wee big job?" "She's the hag, Hamish, spawn o' Granny Aching."
Hamish's expression changed to one of terror.
"Sorry, I didn't mean to speak out of turn, mistress."
"Have you seen a woman with a small boy?" Tiffany demanded. She hadn't much liked Spawn. Hamish nodded.
"Aye, on a black horse, but she kenned I was spying her and called up a mist. She's gone to the other side, but I dinna ken where."
It was hot on the downs, but Tiffany felt a chill. "The other side?"
"Aye," said Rob. "The magic world. A cold place. No a place to take a babby. There's evil things there."
"Monsters?"
"As bad as you can think of. The Queen's world's a land where dreams come true."
"Well, that doesn't sound too—" But then Tiffany remembered some of the dreams she'd had, the ones where you were glad to wake up. We're not talking nice dreams, are we?"
"Nay, mistress."
Tiffany sighed. "All right. How do I get there?"
"You dinna ken?"
"No, I don't. I haven't done this before."
"That's true, Rob," said a Feegle. "She's new to the haggin. We should take her to the kelder." "The kelder? It's no—"
"Quiet," hissed Tiffany.
"Hear that?"
The Feegles looked around.
"What?"
"A susurration." The turf was trembling. There was the smell of snow. Hamish pulled out a pipe, blew it, and started to run across the turf.
"I'll let you know what's happening,"
he cried, as the buzzard sped down and plucked him neatly into the air. The other Feegles formed a circle around Tiffany, their swords drawn. On the ground, snow formed. It didn't fall. It did the opposite of melting, rising fast until the Feegles were up to their necks. Some of the smaller ones began to disappear. Then the 3 dogs arrived. They were big, black, and growling. Tiffany pulled the toad from her pocket. It blinked. "What's up?" "What are these?" "Oh, look. Grimhounds. Eyes of fire and teeth of razor blades." "What should I do?" "Not be here." "Thank you, very helpful. Why is there snow?" "Because this has become the Queen's land here, where it's always winter." Tiffany dropped him back and pulled her frying pan from her sack. The black dog's eyes were flames, and when they snarled, she could see the glint of steel. They were circling, so that no matter how she turned, she could only see 2 at once. It would be the one behind her that attacked first. But some way off, beyond the circle of snow, Tiffany could still see green. So, think. The Queen's country, where there really were the monsters of your nightmares. But you didn't get them in the real world. They wouldn't work. She dived between 2 of the dogs and ran. There was a growl of triumph behind her. She heard the crunch of paws. She jumped over the last of the snow and rolled on the warm turf. One grimhound leapt after her and snapped, but already it was in trouble. No eyes of fire, not here in the real world. Here it was blind, and blood was already dripping from its mouth. You shouldn't jump with a mouthful of razors. Tiffany almost felt sorry for it as it whined in pain, but she hit it with the frying pan, and it lay still. Back in the snow there was a fight going on. She could see 2 dark shapes spinning and snapping. She banged on the pan and shouted. The snow began flowing towards her, and a snarling grimhound sprang and landed in front of her, a Feegle hanging from each ear. Tiffany backed away, holding the pan like a bat. "Come on, jump!" The eyes flamed. Then the dog looked down at the snow and vanished. The snow sank into the ground. The light changed. Tiffany and the wee 3 men were alone on the downs. "Are you fine, mistress?" said Rob. "Yes, it's easy if you get them off the snow." "Aye, I'll round up the lads, mistress." As Rob walked away, Tiffany pulled the toad from her apron. "You know," it said, "there are definite grounds for an action against the owner of those dogs." "What? What are you talking about?" I don't know. The thought simply popped into my head." Then a small foot kicked Tiffany's boot. "We'd best be moving on, mistress." Rob Anybody pointed to a mound with a thicket of thorn trees growing on it. "It's near far." "You live in one of the burial mounds? I thought they were the graves of ancient chieftains." "Aye, there's some old dead kingy in the chamber next door, but he's nae trouble. It's quite roomy, and we've done it up a treat." The entrance to the mound was a hole tucked among the thorn roots, and while Tiffany was slim, it still needed several Feegles to push her through. At least it didn't smell bad, and once you were through, it opened up to the size of quite a large room. In the centre was a small fire, under a hole in the roof, which let the smoke out and brought in a little light. Around the walls were Feegle-sized galleries from floor to ceiling, crowded with pixies washing clothes, sewing, arguing, and here and there fighting. Much younger ones, only a few inches tall, were running around with no clothes on and yelling at the tops of their little voices. There weren't any girls, though, Tiffany thought. No wee free women. No, there was one. The squabbling, bustling crowds parted to let her through. She was prettier than the male Feegles, and came up to Tiffany's ankle. She curtsied. "Are ye the big job hag, mistress?" More or less." "I'm Fionn. The Kelda says she'll see you presently. She's nae strong now." Fionn turned with a swirl of skirts, strode across the chalk floor as if she were a queen herself, and disappeared behind a large round stone that leant against the far wall. Tiffany sat down carefully and lifted the toad from her pocket again. "Sit on my shoulder, will you?" she whispered. "I might need some help here." The ranks of the Nac Mac Feegle were watching her with interest.
"What d'ye think of the wee place, then?" said Rob Anybody. "Great, eh?"
"Yes, very cosy. Do you cook on that fire there?"
"Aye, mistress." "Well, the small stuff,"
added Daft Wally.
"Bunnies and that. The big stuff we roasts in the chalk pit."
Rob's hand was suddenly firmly over the mouth of the struggling Wally. "Sorry, what was that? You roast big stuff in the chalk pit? Is this the kind of big stuff that goes bar?"
"Ach, well, in a manner of speaking."
Rob Anybody was grinning madly and sweating now.
"But no thine, mistress. We ne'er took an aching ship without the leave of Granny."
"Granny let you?"
"Aye, as payment."
"Payment for what?"
"No aching ship ever got caught by wolves, and wi' Hamish in the sky no lamb e'er had its een picked out by corbies."
Tiffany looked sideways at the toad.
"Crows. They sometimes peck out the eyes of—"
"Yes, I know what they do." Tiffany calmed a little. "So, you kept away the crows and wolves for Granny, yes?"
"Aye, mistress. Aye, and a wolf kebab's up a treat. They're no as good as the sheep, though."
Rob Anybody had a hand clamped firmly over Daft Wally's mouth again.
"Well, we tak the odd old ewe that would a deed anyway. And in memory of Granny, when we find lost lambs and sick like, we drive 'em here for when the shepherds come looking, and in return we tak what's hardly worth a thing. And the baccy too, of course."
"You take the tobacco the shepherds leave for my grandmother?"
"Ach, she wouldn't grudge us, mistress. Many's a night she'd share a pipe wi' a kelder outside her house on the wheelies. She'd not let good baccy get all rainy."
"All right, so what did I think happened?" Tiffany thought. That she'd come back for a packet of jolly sailor? Did I think she was somehow still walking the hills? Did I... Yes, I do want that to be true. I don't want to think she's simply gone. I knew nothing about her because she didn't know how to talk to me, and I was too scared to talk to her. And into Tiffany's mind, as it always did sooner or later, came the figure of the China shepherdess, swirling in red mists of shame. Tiffany's father took her to the fair at the town of Yelp once, a 10-mile journey off the chalk. Granny had never been there, her father said, because she hated leaving the chalk. She said it made her dizzy. Anyway, it was a great day. Tiffany was sick on candy floss and won the star prize on the hoopla stall, a China shepherdess painted white and blue. And next morning she'd proudly presented it to Granny Aching. The old woman had taken it in her wrinkled hands and stared at it for a long time. And that had been a cruel thing to do, Tiffany was sure now. The China shepherdess had an old-fashioned long dress with bulgy bits at the side that made it look as though she had saddlebags in her knickers. There were blue ribbons on the shepherd's crook, and all over the straw bonnet. There were even blue bows on the dainty foot poking out from the frilly hem of her dress. This wasn't a shepherdess who'd ever tramped the hills in big boots, with an old sack around her shoulders, or kept up with the champion shearer for 7 hours, sheep for sheep, until the air was hazy with grease and wool and blue with cussing. What had Granny Aching thought about it? Perhaps, Tiffany thought wretchedly, the old lady had seen it as an insult, thinking she was being told this was what a shepherdess should look like, that a shepherdess should sparkle like a starry night, that Granny wasn't right. Tiffany hadn't meant that. But then a few months later Granny had died. If only she'd said something. But Granny liked silence. And now it turned out that she'd made friends with a lot of little blue men who'd liked her too. "All right," she said. "I understand.
You're no going to get nasty about it?
No, it all works. Then suddenly Tiffany's ears began to tingle strangely. Some of the Feegles were busy on the far side of the chamber. What she thought was a round stone was being rolled aside, revealing a large hole from which came a faint golden light. The Feegles began forming up in 2 rows leading to it, and now she felt her ears squelch as though all the wax were running out as a Feegle came walking out of the hole. The newcomer's hair was white instead of red, and he was holding some sort of fat skin bag, bristling with pipes.
"Now there's a sight not many humans have seen and lived," said the toad. "He's playing the mouse pipes."
Tiffany tried to ignore the 2 little ears still on the bag. "They make my ears tingle."
"I pitch, see? Pixies hear things differently from humans. He's probably their battle poet."
"He makes up heroic songs?"
"No. He recites poems that frighten the enemy. Remember, words are important to the Nac Mac Feegle, and when a well-trained Gonigal recites, the enemy's ears explode. Oh, it seems they're ready for you."
Rob Anybody, in fact, was politely tapping Tiffany's toe cap.
"The Kelda will see you now, mistress."
The piper stopped playing, and Tiffany felt hundreds of bright little eyes watching her.
"Special sheep liniment,"
whispered the toad.
"Pardon? Take it in as a gift."
As Tiffany got closer, with the toad hanging on tightly, she realized that what she thought was a stone was in fact an old round shield, green-blue and corroded with age. She lay down and found that the hole it had covered was wide enough for her to crawl through. But she had to leave her legs outside because it was impossible to get all of her into the room beyond. One reason was the bed, which held the Kelda. The other was that what the room was mostly full of, piled up around the walls and spilling across the floor, was gold. There was only one candle which smelt of sheep fat, but gold plates and cups gleamed, glistened, glinted, and glittered the light back and forth. Theon sat on a stool by the bed, watching Tiffany intently, while the Kelda was sitting up against a pile of pillows. She was much, much fatter than the male Pixies.
"So, you'll be Sarah Aching's wee girl?"
"Yes, I. And you're the Kelda?"
I yes."
The Kelda smiled.
"What was your name now?"
"Tiffany."
"Ah, a good name. In our tongue, you'd be Tifa Thoin, land under wave. Your wee brother is safe, child. You could say safer now in the Queen's own country than he's ever been. And there's the evil light. I dare say there's a mother grieving."
"Our father, too."
"And his wee sister?"
Tiffany felt the words "yes, of course" trot automatically onto her tongue, but she knew it would be stupid to let them go any further. The little old woman's dark eyes were seeing right into her head.
"Aye, you're a born hag right enough, child. You've got the litty-bitty bit inside of you that holds on right, the bit that watches the rest of ye. 'Tis the first sight and second thoughts ye have that's rare in a big job."
Tiffany didn't know what to say to that, so she said, "Why would the Queen take my brother? Why is she after me?"
"Maybe she wants to test ye."
"Test me?"
"To see how good ye are. The Queen'll have to get past ye if she wants this land, because ye're the hag noo that guards the edges and the gateways. Your granny was, so was I, and noo I'm passing the duty to ye. Like your granny, ye have the first sight and the second thoughts."
"Don't you mean second sight, like people who can see ghosts and stuff?"
"Ach, no. That's typical big job thinking. First sight is when you can see what's really there, Not what your heed tells you ought to be there. No, listen to me, because I'm fading and there's much you dinna ken. You think this is the whole world? No, there are more worlds than stars in the sky, and they're everywhere, big and small. Some ye can see, some ye canna, but there are doors to fun. They might be a hill or a tree or a stone, or in a thought in your head, but they're there all around ye. You'll have to learn to see 'em, because some of them is poisonous, understand? No, you ask me why the Queen should take your boy. The Queen dotes on children, but has none of her ain, so she'll give the wee boy everything he wants. Only what he wants.
He only wants sweets.
Aye, is that so? Well, what he needs is love and care and teaching. He needs to be growed up strong, but he willna get that frae the Queen. He'll get sweeties forever. But he's a lucky wee boy. He's a sister willing to bring him back. Do you ken how to be strong?
I think so.
Good, because I'm weakening. I canna defend this place no, Tiffin. So here's my bargain, child. I'll point you towards the Queen, and in return you'll tak over as Kelder.
That surprised Fionn as much as Tiffany. Her head shot up sharply.
But she canna. Can she no? She's no a pixie mither. She doesna know her ways. Aye, but ye ken weel a daughter canna run her mither's clan. You're a dutiful girl, Fionn, but it's time ye were seeking a clan of your ain, because ye canna stay here.
The Kelder looked up at Tiffany.
Dinna fret. I only need ye to mind things for a wee while. Mind the land like your granny did, and mind my boys. Will ye do it, Tiffin?
She held up a thumb the size of a match head. What'll I have to do?
The thinking. My lads are good lads, none braver, but they're no great thinkers. You'll have to help them help ye. But mither,
Fionn protested.
she canna carry out the duties of a Kelder.
Oh, I don't see why not, if they're explained to me.
Oh, do you know? Well, that's going to be most interesting. So, what do you say?
Said the Kelder. Aware of Fionn glaring at her, maybe because of Fionn glaring at her, Tiffany licked her thumb and touched it gently against the Kelder's.
It's done then.
The Kelder lay back and seemed to shrink. Then she beckoned Tiffany closer.
No, for my part of the bargain. Find the place where the time didn't fit. There's the way in.
Then the Kelder sniffed and struggled to sit up again.
Do I smell Sarah Aching's special sheep liniment?
Oh, yes. Here.
The best thing humans ever made.
It puts hairs on your chest.
Ach, I'll risk a curl or two. I'll just have a large wee drop, Fiona, for I go.
The old Kelder took from Fionn a leather cup about the size of a thimble, held it up, and Tiffany tipped the bottle. The Kelder took something too small to be a gulp, but too large to be a sip.
Aye, it's a long time since I tasted this brose. Your granny and I used to have a sip or two on cold nights.
She lowered the cup.
Fionn, fetch Rob anybody and William the Gonagall. The big job's blocking the hole. I dare say this room.
With a smouldering glance at Tiffany, Fionn squeezed past.
You ken anyone who keeps bees, Tiffin?
Tiffany nodded.
Then you'll know why a Kelder doesn't have many daughters. You canna have two queens in one hive wi' you to fight. A Kelder may be blessed with only one daughter in her whole life, but she'll have hundreds and hundreds of sons.
They are all your sons?
Oh, aye. Except for a few of my brothers who travelled here with me when I came to be Kelder. And no, Fionn must take her pick of them that will follow her and seek a clan that needs a Kelder. That is our way.
Tiffany felt something move past her, and Rob and the bard came into the room. There was rustling and whispering outside, too. The old Kelder looked at William the Gonigal.
Tiffan will be our Kelder until a new one can be fetched. Am I right that this has been done before? Aye, the songs say twice before.
Then William frowned.
Or 3, if you include the time when the Queen was...
He was drowned out by the cry that went up behind Tiffany.
"Nae Queen, nae King, nae Master, we will not be fooled again."
The old Kelder raised a hand.
"Well, the choice is made. I've been your Kelder for 70 years, and in memory of me and Sarah Aching, you'll help her steal back her wee brother."
She lay back in her bed.
"And no, I'd ha' the Gonigal play the bonny flowers."
The old Kelder finally fell silent. William lifted his mouse pipes, and Fionn started to cry. Rob Anybody looked up at Tiffany.
"Could I ask ye to go out into the big chamber, Kelder? We had things to do, ye ken."
Tiffany nodded, and with great care backed out. She found a corner and sat with her back to the wall. She'd expected a lot of waily-waily, but it seemed the death of the Kelder was too serious for that. The hills had been silent the day Granny Aching died. Tiffany'd noticed it. It was no longer the silence of many little noises, but a dome of quiet around the hut. And she knew then, even before she went in and found Granny lying on the narrow bed. She'd felt coldness spread through her, and a voice, her own, was saying, "It's too late. Tears are no good. No time to say anything. There are things to be done." So she fed the dogs and tidied up the shed. There really wasn't that much to say a person had lived there, unless you counted the hundreds of jolly sailor wrappers pinned on one wall. It was very unusual for Granny Aching to say more than a sentence, but one day she'd told Tiffany a sort of a story. She'd looked at the wrapper and said, "I must have looked at 1,000 of these things, and I never once saw his boat. And that's 'cause the boat is just where you can't see it. He's got a boat for chasing the great white whale-fish on the salt sea. He's always chasing it round the world. It's called Mopey, and I heard tell it's a beast like a big cliff of chalk. But he never will catch it, the reason being the world is round like a big plate, and so's the sea, and so they're chasing one another, and it's almost like he's chasing hisself. You never want to go to sea, Jiggit. Everyone says that's where worse things happen. You stop along here, where the hills is in your bones." And that was it. One of the very few times Granny ever said anything that wasn't in some way about sheep. And Tiffany used to dream about the jolly sailor chasing the whalefish, and sometimes the whalefish would chase her, but the jolly sailor always arrived in his mighty ship just in time, and their chase would start again. Sometimes she'd run to the lighthouse and wake up just as the door swung open. She'd never seen the sea, of course, but a neighbour had a picture on the wall that showed a lot of men clinging to a raft in what looked like a huge lake full of waves. Tiffany had sat by the narrow bed and wished she'd had a chance to say sorry about the shepherdess. Then she'd gone home and told everyone Granny was dead. She was 7, and the world had ended. Someone was tapping on her boot. It was the toad. "What am I supposed to do?" Tiffany said.
"Well, if you hit your head on this low ceiling, claim for damages." Did I just say that?
"Yes, why?"
"I don't know."
"Well, I meant, what do the Pixies want me to do now?"
"Oh, I don't think it works like that. You're the Kelder, so you say."
"But why can't Fionn be Kelder?"
Can't help you there." "Can I be of service?"
said a voice. She turned and saw William the Gonigal. He was noticeably different from the other Feegles. His hair was neater, plaited into one pigtail, and he didn't have as many tattoos. Yes, why can't Fionn be Kelda here?
Good question. But ye ken a Kelda cannot wed her brother. She must find a new clan and wed a warrior there.
I see. And what about the Queen? You were going to say something before, but they stopped you. William looked embarrassed.
Aye. Well, there was a time when we lived in the Queen's world and served her before she grew so cold, but she tricked us, so we rebelled. It was a dark time. She doesn't like us, and that is all I will say. If you will excuse me, Kelda.
He walked away and was lost in the shadows of the mound. Tiffany thought for a moment. She should have told me where to look.
But she didn't know where, only the signs to look for. You must find the place where the time is different.
But how do I do that? You can't see time.
Listen, let's get out of here.
Tiffany stuck her arms through the entrance hole and pulled herself up into the fresh air, and sitting among the trunks of the old thorn bushes, she stared up at the sky. I think I need to talk to Hamish.
Right ye are, mistress,
said a voice by her ear. She turned her head. How long have you been here?
All the time, mistress, on account of I'm studying to be a gonagall.
A young pixie flourished a set of mouse pipes.
They willna let me play doon there, because they're saying my playing sounds like a spider trying to fart through its ears.
And what's your name?
No as big as medium-sized Jock, but bigger than wee Jock. You ken there's no that many Feegle names, so we had to share.
Well, no as big as little Jock.
That'd be medium-sized Jock, mistress.
Right, well, not as big as medium-sized Jock, but bigger than wee Jock. I can...
That's no as big as medium-sized Jock, but bigger than wee Jock, mistress. You're one Jock short.
Wouldn't you be happier with Henry?
Ach no, there's nae history to the name. But there's mony a fine story of the exploits of no as big as medium-sized Jock, but bigger than wee Jock.
Tiffany didn't have the heart to say that they must have been very long stories. Instead, she said, Well, please, I want to talk to Hamish.
Nae problem. He's up there right now.
He vanished, and a moment later Tiffany heard, or rather felt, a Feegle whistle. There was a rush of wings overhead, a whirring noise, a moment of silence, and then a small, rather muffled voice said,
Ah, Crevens.
The body of Hamish was upside down in the turf a few feet away. His arms with their twirlers were still outstretched. It took some time to get him out. If he landed head first and spinning, Tiffany was told, he had to be unscrewed in the opposite direction so his ears didn't come off. When he was finally upright, she said, You know, there's a sort of toy we make that might help you. You make a kind of cloth bag, tie strings to it and a stone to the strings, and when you throw it up, the bag fills with air and the stone floats down. Hamish the aviator stared at her. Do you understand?
Aye.
Good. Now, tell me, where was the Queen when the mist came down? Hamish pointed.
Yonder, mistress.
In the distance, Tiffany could see more mounds and a few stones from the old days. Trilithons they were called, which simply meant 3 stones. They'd been dragged from miles away and stacked like toy bricks. Some said they were part of some old religion and there'd been human sacrifices there. Some said they marked ancient graves, and some said they were a warning. Avoid this place.
Anything else, mistress?
Said Hamish.
No, then I'll be going.
He raised his arms and started to run across the turf. The buzzard skimmed down and snatched him into the sky. He hardly seems to spend any time on the ground, said Tiffany.
Aye, mistress,
said not as big as medium Jock, but bigger than wee Jock.
He's never happy unless he's got the wind under his kilt.
And the birds don't mind?
Ach, no. All the birds know it's good luck to be friends with a Nac Mac Feegle.
They do?
Well, they know it's unlucky not to be.
Tiffany looked at the sun. It was only a few hours from setting. "I must find the way in," she said. "Look, not as small as—"
"No, as big as—"
Yes, thank you. Where's Rob anybody? In fact, where is everybody?"
There's a bit of a debate going on down below. They're, discussing ye."
"What about me?" The Pixie was blushing now, and since he was blue to begin with, this turned him an unpleasant violet colour. Tiffany gave up and slid back down the hole. When her eyes got accustomed once more to the gloom, she saw that many of the Pixies had for some reason smoothed down their red hair with grease. They all stared at her. "We ought to be going," she said to Rob Anybody, who'd been washing his face in a basin made of half a walnut shell. Water dripped from his beard, which he'd plaited, and there were plaits in his hair too. If he turned suddenly, he'd probably whip somebody to death.
Weel," he said, "there's a wee matter we got to sort out first, Kelder."
He looked worried. "Yes?" Tiffany spotted Fionn on the other side of the cave. She was smiling in a worrying way. And perhaps the Pixies didn't realise quite how loudly they whispered.
"Aye, she's a bit on the big side. Aye, but a Kelder has to be big. And a bit young. Well, she needn't have too many babbies just yet. Nae more than 10, maybe."
Now Tiffany lived on a farm, and any little beliefs that babies are delivered by storks tended to get sorted out early on. She knew all about the bags of red chalk the rams had strapped to their chests, and why the ewes with the red smudges on their backs were going to be mothers in the spring. "So what's happening, Rob?" she said.
Weel, it's the clan rules, ye ken. You being the new Kelder and
I didn't quite catch that.
"We've scrubbed up nice, ye ken. Some of the lads actually had a bath in the dew pond, though 'tis only May, and the big Yan washed under his arms for the first time ever."
"Yes?"
"So maybe you'd tell us—" "They want to know which one of them you're going to marry," said Fionn loudly. "It's the rules. You have to choose your man and name the day or quit as Kelder." "Aye," said Rob, not meeting Tiffany's eye.
"Oh," Tiffany was thinking, "this isn't happening. I can't. He could. This is ridiculous. Run away." "But how you deal with this is going to be important," said her second thoughts. "They're all watching you." She forced herself to smile. "Wow, this is very unexpected. A big honour."
"Aye."
Rob looked at the floor. Tiffany's second thought said, "He's not happy about it either." "Well, there's so many of you, it'll be hard to choose. I'd like a little fresh air while I think about it." Tiffany didn't let the smile fade until she was out on the mound again. "Toad?" The toad crawled out from the bushes, chewing something. "They want to marry me." "What are you eating?"
"A very undernourished slug."
"I said they want to marry me."
And? Oh, right, yeah, the height thing. When you're 5'7", you'll still be 6 inches.
Don't laugh.
Well, it'd be a terrible insult to refuse.
"I'm not going to marry a Feegle. I can't have hundreds of babies. Tell me what to do."
"Me tell the Kelder? I wouldn't dare. And I don't like being shouted at either. Toads have their pride, you know."
It crawled back into the leaves. Tiffany took a deep breath. The old Kelder must have known about this, so she must have thought I'd be able to deal with it. There must be a way round the rules which said she had to accept a husband and to name the day. She stared at the thorn trees. She slid back down the hole. The Pixies were waiting nervously. "Rob anybody? I accept you," she said. Rob's face became a mask of terror.
"Oh, Crivens!"
"But it's the bride who names the day, right?"
"Aye, that's the tradition."
"Then I shall. Listen, at the end of the world is a mountain of granite rock a mile high, and every year a tiny bird flies to the rock and wipes its beak on it. Well, when the little bird has worn the mountain down to the size of a grain of sand, that's the day I'll marry you." Rob's terror turned to outright panic, but then he hesitated. Very slowly he started to grin.
"Aye, good idea. It doesn't need to rush these things."
"Absolutely."
"And that'll give us time to sort out the guest list and all."
"Right."
"That sort of thing can take forever."
"Oh, yes."
"But she's really saying no,"
Theon burst out.
"It'd take millions of years for the bird to—" "She's named the day,"
Rob shouted.
"You all heard her, and anyone arguing will feel my boot."
He drew his sword and waved it in the air.
"No, we've a wee laddie to steal back frae the Queen. Who's wi' me?"
That worked. The Pixies liked clear goals. Hundreds of swords and battle-axes were thrust into the air, and the war cry of the Nac Mac Feegle echoed around the chamber. Unfortunately, since they were very individualistic, each Pixie had his own cry. Tiffany could make out a few over the din.
"They can tak our lives, but they cannae tak our trousers. You'll tak the high road, and I'll tak your wallet. Ach, stick it up your trackans."
But gradually the voices came together in one roar that shook the walls.
"Nae king, nae queen, nae maister will nae be fooled again. Let's gae!"
cried Rob, and as one Feegle the Pixies swarmed up the hole, and in a few seconds the chamber was empty, except for the Gonagle and Fion. Where have they gone?"
"Ach, they just go." "Aye,"
said William.
"they'll run around a while, maybe stun a few bunnies and fall over a few times. They'll slow down when they find out they dinna ken yet what they're supposed to do."
"Right." She pulled herself out of the hole and found the Toad waiting.
"I listened in. Well done, very diplomatic."
"Well, we'd better be going." She grabbed the Toad and put it in her apron pocket. "You're coming too." She headed for the mounds and stones. Find a place where the time doesn't fit. Well, the mounds were history. So were the old stones. Did they fit here? Well, yes. They'd grown old here. They were part of the landscape. She wandered around the trilithons, which looked a bit like huge stone doorways. But when she tried walking through them both ways, nothing happened. She looked around and saw the Gonagle standing on a fallen stone. "Can you see anything?" she said.
"Oh, aye."
"The way to the Queen's land?"
"Aye."
"Well, would you care to tell me?"
"A kelder would see the way hersel."
"But you could tell me."
"Aye, and you could say, please, I'm 96 years old and nae a dolly in your dolly house."
"Please, then, I don't know what to do."
"Ach, you're no doing so badly. You'll find the way if you take your time. Just don't stamp your foot and expect the world to do your bidding like you're shouting for sweeties. Use your eyes, use your heed."
"What about you, Toad?" said Tiffany, looking into the apron pocket. "Oh, you're on your own, I'm afraid. Whoever I used to be, I didn't know much about invisible doors, and I resent being press-ganged too." The Toad turned over. Then Tiffany was aware that the Feegle were turning up again. "Oh, no," she thought. "This isn't fair. They think I know what to do." And then she saw the teddy bear. It was very small, and the kind of red you don't quite get in nature, and she knew what it was. Wentworth loved teddy bear sweets. They tasted like glue mixed with sugar and were made of 100% artificial additives. "Ah," she said, "my brother was certainly here." This caused a stir. She walked forward, and there was another sweet, green this time, quite hard to see against the turf. "Okay," thought Tiffany. A little way away was one of the 3 stone arches, 2 big stones with another laid across the top. She'd walked through it before, but nothing had happened. But nothing should happen, she thought. You can't leave a doorway into your world that anyone can walk through by accident. You have to know it was there. Perhaps that's the only way it would work. And then she saw the bird, a swallow hunting flies, and its swoop took it behind the stones, and the effect was odd. It passed behind one stone, and her eyes moved following the swoop. But it was late. There was a moment when the swallow should have appeared, but didn't. Then it passed across the gap, and for a moment was on both sides of the other stone at the same time. So look for a place where time doesn't fit. The world seen through that gap is 1 second behind the time here, she said aloud. No, I know this is the entrance. There was some whooping and clapping from the Feegle.
"Aye, that was great,"
said Rob.
"Aye,"
said Daft Wally.
"and you spotted them sweeties. We didn't think you'd see the wee green one."
The rest of the Pixies glared at him. Tiffany sagged. "You knew the way through, didn't you?"
"Oh, aye. Did we know you still live in the Queen's country? But we rebelled against her evil rule. And then she threw us out on account of us being drunk at the time. It wasn't like that at all."
"So you were all waiting to see if I could find the way, right?"
"Aye, you did well, lassie."
"Aye," said William.
"You used your eyes and your heed. That's what a real hag does." "Right," said Rob. "So show us the way through."
Tiffany hesitated and thought, I walked through this arch before and nothing happened. But I wasn't looking then, or thinking either, not properly. The Feegle watched her solemnly. "Okay." She stood in front of the stones and stretched out her arms on either side of her and shut her eyes. Very slowly she stepped forward. Something crunched under her boots, but she didn't open her eyes until she couldn't feel the stones any more. And when she did open them, it was a black and white landscape. Tiffany stared into the world of the Queen. The cold was like little needles all over her skin. There was no sun anywhere. Snow lay under a sky so dirty white she might have been standing inside a ping-pong ball, and hoofprints stretched away towards a forest of black trees. She looked down. There was a sugary yellow teddy bear in the snow, and the Nac Mac Feegles were pouring through the gate. Without speaking, they spread out. They'd drawn their swords, and they were watchful.
"Right," said
Rob.
"Well done. You wait here, and we'll get your wee brother back, nae problemo."
"I'm coming too."
"Nay, the Kildad isn't."
"This one does. He's my brother. And where are we?"
"This is what you call Fairyland."
"Fairyland? No, it's not. Fairyland's all trees and flowers and sunshine and people with wings and tinkliness. I've seen pictures."
"Aye, well, it isn't always like this."
2 pixies carried Tiffany easily. She skimmed across the snow, the clan running beside her. No sun in the sky. That was strange. And there was something else. Things were not finished. Like the trees in the forest they were heading towards. A tree's a tree, she thought. It has bark and branches and roots, and you know they're there, even if the tree's so far away that it's a blob. But she had a feeling the trees here were blobs, and were growing the roots and twigs as she got closer, as if they were thinking, "Quick, someone's coming, look real." Then, as they reached the forest, the light grew dimmer. It became blue and eerie. "Stop," Tiffany said. The pixies lowered her to the ground, but Rob said,
"We shouldn't hang around here too long."
His eyes scanned the blue shadows.
"No, I'll tell ye where ye are. Ye ken them wee bitty bugs that clings onto the ships and sucks themselves full of blood, then drops off again? Well, this whole world is like one of them."
"You mean like a tick, a parasite?"
"Aye, it floats around till it finds a place that's weak on a world and opens a door. Then the Queen sends in her folk, for the stealing, ye ken. Aye, we was champion robbers for the Queen, but 'twas ne'er enough for her, she always wanted more. We'd nae worries about stealing a golden cup from a rich big job, ye ken. But it's no right, we said, to steal an old lady's only peg, or the food from them as dinna hae enough to eat."
And at the edge of the shadowy wood, Tiffany listened to the story of a little world where nothing grew, and everything had to come from somewhere else, a world that took and gave nothing back except fear, because people learned to stay in bed when they heard strange noises at night, because if anyone gave her trouble, the Queen could control their dreams. She could take their dreams and make them more solid. For this was where things like grimhounds and the headless horsemen came from, and this time you didn't wake up just as the monsters caught up with you. And the Queen's people didn't only take food, they took people too. "Children," said Tiffany.
"Aye, your brother's not the first. The Queen thinks she's good and kind wi' children, but she's an elf. She doesn't know how to be."
"And what'll happen to him if we don't get him back?" Silence. "I said—"
"She'll send him back in due time," said the Gonigal, "and he willna be any older, ye ken. Nothing grows old here, nothing grows at all."
"So he'll be all right?" Another silence.
"Tell me." "Well," said Rob, "in this place years pass like days. The Queen'll maybe get tired of the lad after a couple of months, but a couple of months here, ye ken. When he comes back to the mortal world, you'll be an old lady or maybe deed. So if yous has bairns o' your own, you'd better tell them to watch out for a wee sticky child wandering the hills shouting for sweeties, 'cause that'll be their Uncle Wentworth."
Tiffany stared at him.
"And that wouldn't be the worst of it neither. Live in dreams for too long, you can never wake up properly, you can never get the hang of reality again, and you go mad. It's happened before," said William.
"I will get him back." Tiffany turned back to the line of hoofprints and began to walk. She watched the trees get realer as she approached them. So she stopped and scraped some snow away from the base of one. For a moment there was nothing but greyness where the base should be. Then, even as she watched, the bark grew downwards, pretending it had been there all the time. This was a lot more worrying than the grimhounds. They were simply monsters. They could be beaten. This was frightening. And she felt the fear grow. Suddenly the terror took her. She ran towards it, raising the pan. She had to get through the forest, get her brother, leave this place. Somewhere behind her, voices started to shout. And she woke up. There was no snow, only the whiteness of her bedroom ceiling. Sheep were baaing on the distant hillside, and Tiffany sighed. So then she woke up, and it was all a dream. Just about the worst ending you could have to any story, and it all seemed so real. She could remember the smoky smell in the Pixies' cave, and who was it? Oh yes, Rob Anybody. She leant over and peered under the bed. Nothing there but the gazunder. The floor creaked like it always did. She got dressed, and when she went downstairs, breakfast was ready. Her mother was busy at the sink washing dishes, and a plate of steaming porridge was waiting on the table. "I'll make some more butter today," she said, sitting down. Her mother nodded and put a plate down on the draining board. There was a rattling noise. The china shepherdess on Granny's shelf was moving sideways of its own accord, and as Tiffany watched, with her porridge spoon halfway to her mouth, it slid off and smashed on the floor. But the rattling went on. Now it was coming from the big oven. She could see the door shaking on the hinges. She turned to her mother and saw her put another plate down, but it wasn't being held in a hand now. Suddenly the oven door burst open, and hundreds of pixies spilled out across the tiles.
"Didn't he eat the porridge?"
The walls shifted, the floor moved. Now the thing at the sink wasn't even human, just stuff, grey as old dough. It lumbered towards Tiffany. She looked up at the thing's tiny black eyes, and the scream came from deep inside and seemed to spread as it left Tiffany's mouth until it became a black tunnel in front of her.
"Who d'ye think you're looking at, pal? Crivens, you're gonna get stitch a kickin'."
Tiffany opened her eyes. She was lying on damp ground in the snowy, gloomy wood. Pixies were watching her carefully, but others were staring into the gloom. There was stuff in the trees, grey lumps that hung there like old cloth. Then William was standing beside her. "That was a dream, wasn't it?"
"Well, it was, and there again it wasn't."
Tiffany sat up. "But you were in my dream. What was that creature?"
"What we call a drome. Ye ken spiders?"
"Of course."
"Well, as spiders spin webs, dromes spin dreams. The drome makes a dream for ye wi' a trap in it. If ye eat anything in the dream, you'll never want to leave it."
"And what's in it for the drome?"
"It has fun watching ye eat dream food until ye starve to death. Then the drome eats ye. Not right away, of course. It'll wait until you've gone a wee bit runny, because it hasn't any teeth."
"So how can anyone get out?"
"Find the drome," said Rob Anybody. "It'll be in the dream somewhere, in disguise. Then chopping its head off generally works."
"Well, thank you for coming after me, but how did you do it?"
"Ach, we can find a way inty anywhere," said William. "But mark ye, there'll be more of them, and they're cunning. The Queen uses them as guards."
"Well, I won't be fooled." The memory of the huge dead face of the drome was trying to come back into her mind again. She remembered the horror of the moment when the thing had lumbered around, changing shape. She stood up. "Does anyone have my frying pan?" "Thank you. Now let's keep going." She set off through the strange trees. The hoofprints almost glowed in the gloom, but it was hard looking at things without her head aching. Things that seemed far off got closer too quickly. Trees changed shape as she passed them. Still, this is a made-up world, Tiffany thought. Almost like a story. It doesn't have enough reality in it for distances and shapes to work properly. And the snow was melting around her feet too, although melting was the wrong word. It was simply disappearing, leaving leaves and grass. Yes, she thought, I'm more real than this place. She heard a buzzing overhead and looked up. Suddenly the air was filled with small people, smaller than a feegle, with wings like dragonflies. There was a golden glow around them. Entranced, Tiffany reached out a hand. At the same moment, what felt like the entire clan of Nac Mac Feegle landed on her back and sent her sliding into a snowdrift. When she struggled out, the clearing was a battlefield. The pixies were jumping and slashing at the flying creatures, which were buzzing around them like wasps. Two of them had lifted a struggling Rob Anybody off his feet by his hair. Tiffany leapt up and grabbed him around the waist. One of the creatures bit her on the finger. Began a voice somewhere.
"Crivens, no, there's gonna be poetry," said Rob.
The moan rolled around the clearing. It sounded like some animal in terrible pain, but was in fact not as big as medium-sized Jock, but bigger than wee Jock, who was standing on a snowdrift with one hand pressed to his heart and the other outstretched theatrically.
It is with great lamentation and much worrying dismay,
the Pixie groaned,
that we regard the doleful prospect of Fairyland in considerable decay.
Now the flying creatures stopped attacking and began to panic.
With quite a large number of dreadful incidents happening every day, including, I'm sorry to say, an aerial attack by the otherwise quite attractive Fae.
The flyers screeched. Some crashed into each other, others into the snow. The ones still capable of flight swarmed off among the trees.
Witnessed by all of us at this time, and celebrated in this hasty rhyme,
the Pixie shouted after them. Then they were gone. Feegles were picking themselves up. Some were bleeding, several were groaning. Tiffany looked at her finger. The fairy bite had left 2 tiny holes.
"It's not too bad,"
said Rob as she put him down.
"No one taken. Just a few cases where the lads didn't put their hands over their ears in time."
"Are they all right?"
"Oh, they'll be fine with counselling."
"That lad," said William proudly, clapping the reciter on the shoulder, "was the worst poetry I've ever heard. We'll make a Gonigal out of you yet." In Fairyland, words really have power, Tiffany thought. And I am more real. I'll remember that. The Pixies reassembled, and they set off again.
"That's your little people with wings,"
said Rob, as Tiffany sucked at her finger.
"Happier no?"
"Why were they trying to carry you away?"
"Ach, they carries their victims to their nest, where their young ones—"
"Stop. This'll be horrible, right?"
"Aye, gruesome."
"Yet you used to live here."
"But it wasn't so bad then. The Queen wasn't as cold in them days. The King was still around then, and she was happy."
"What happened? Did the King die?"
"No, they had words, if you tak my meaning."
"You mean like an argument?"
"Aye, maybe. But they was magical words. Forests destroyed, mountains exploding, a few hundred deaths, that kind of thing. And he went off to his own world. So noo there's dromes and hounds and stinging fae and such stuff creeping in from their own worlds, and the whole place has gone down the lavvy."
They tramped on through the forest, and then, all at once, they heard hoofbeats. "It's her," Tiffany thought. "What shall I do now?" The Feegles leapt behind the trees, but she gripped the pan nervously and stared into the blue shadows between the trees.
"Come away out of the path," hissed Rob. "Ye canna beat the Queen face to face."
The hoofbeats were louder now, and suddenly a stag with wild red eyes burst through the trees, steam pouring off it. It leapt over Tiffany, and she smelt the stink of it as she ducked. Then came the dogs. The first she bowled over with the pan, the other turned to snap at her. Then it looked down in amazement as pixies erupted from the snow under each paw. It's hard to bite when your 4 feet are moving away in different directions. Then other pixies landed on its head, and biting anything ever again soon became impossible. The Feegles hated grimhounds. Tiffany turned and looked up at a white horse. There was a boy on it.
"Who are you?"
he said.
"This is my forest."
Tiffany peered at him closely. Your name is—"
"You will not speak to me."
The boy raised his riding whip, and there was a very faint thwap. The Feegle had formed a pyramid under the horse's belly and cut through the saddle girth. The boy landed in the snow. He scrambled backwards, staring at Tiffany in horror. "I know you," she said. "Your name is Roland, the Baron's son. They said you died in the forest."
"You mustn't talk about that."
"Why not?"
"Bad things happen."
"They're already happening. Look, I'm here to rescue my—" But the boy had already got to his feet and was running back through the forest. Tiffany ran after him as he dodged from tree to tree. Then he paused and looked back.
"Get away from me!"
But she ran up to him, saying, "I know how to get you out," and danced. She was holding the hand of someone with the head of a parrot. Her feet moved perfectly. They twirled her. This time her hand was caught by a peacock's head. She was in a ballroom full of masked people dancing. She was wearing a long dress which glittered. "Okay," she thought, "another dream. I should have looked where I was going. There was a drome there, and I didn't stop to look." The music was strange. There was a rhythm, but it sounded muffled and odd, as if being played backwards under water. Said the peacock. "Oh, yes, fine." "Oh, woof, woof, woof." This seemed to work. The peacock-headed dancer bowed and said sadly and wandered off. "The drome's in here somewhere," Tiffany told herself, "and it must be a good one. This is a big dream." People in brilliant costumes and masks were now heading arm in arm for long tables piled with food such as Tiffany had only seen in pictures. On the farm, food was mostly shades of white or brown. It was never pink and blue, and never wobbled. Everything here had cream on it, or chocolate whirls, or thousands of little coloured balls. This wasn't food. It was what food became if it had been good and gone to food heaven. It was piled up against mounds of greenery and enormous arrangements of flowers. Here and there were huge transparent figures, a glittering cockerel, a jolly fat man, a swan, all carved in ice. It seemed a long time since Tiffany had eaten anything, but this food was too obviously bait. It was supposed to say, "Hello, little kiddie, eat me." "I'm getting the hang of this," Tiffany thought. "Good job it didn't think of cheese." And there was cheese. Suddenly cheese had always been there. And just a taste wouldn't hurt, surely. After all, she was in control. She'd seen through the dream straight away, so it couldn't have any effect, could it? Already she was holding the cheese knife. She didn't remember picking it up. Then a drop of cold water landed on her hand. She glanced up at a glittering ice carving, a shepherdess with a saddlebag dress and a big bonnet, although Tiffany was sure it had been a swan when she'd looked before. She looked at the cheese knife. She'd nearly been fooled. "Be a sword," she said. After all, while the drone was making her dream, she was doing the dreaming, and she was real. There was a clang. "Correction, be a sword that isn't so heavy." This time she got something she could hold. Then there was a rustling in the greenery. A face poked out.
"Psh! Didn't you eat the cannabis?"
"You're a bit late."
"Ach, weel, this old drome's cunning. The dream wouldn't let us in till we was properly dressed."
He stepped out looking sheepish in a black suit with a bow tie. There was more rustling, and other pixies emerged, looking like red-headed penguins.
"Have ye spotted the creature yet?"
"No, it's too crowded."
"Then we'll help ye look. Spread out, lads. Pretend you're enjoying the ceilidh." "What?" said Daft Wally. "You mean get drunk and fight and that? Nay, ye puddin', this is posh. Ye mingle and mak small talk."
The Nac Mac Feegle charged in.
"The band plays divinely, I dinna think. Hey, Jemma, ha' ye no got pomfret? Mac caviar deep fried, will ya?"
Tiffany set off along the room and pulled open a pair of double doors. There was nothing but blackness beyond it. So the only way out was to find the drome. But it could be anywhere, anything. She stared at the crowd, then she saw Roland. He was sitting at a table spread with food and had a spoon in his hand. She ran over and knocked it to the floor. "Haven't you any sense? You want to stay here forever?" Roland only stared at her. Then she felt movement behind her and glanced around. There was the drome, almost hidden behind a pillar. She shook Roland. "Are you all right? Have you eaten anything?" "Whop, whop, whop," murmured the boy. Tiffany turned back to the drome. It was moving towards her now, slowly, like a snowman made of dirty snow. The music was getting louder. Out on the huge dance floor, the animal-headed couples whirled faster and faster. The floor shook. The dream was in trouble now. The Feegles were running toward her from every side, trying to be heard above the din. The drome lurched at her, podgy white fingers grasping the air. "First sight," breathed Tiffany. She cut Roland's head off. In front of her, the drome fell backwards. Now she was holding the frying pan in her hand, but it had cut beautifully. Odd things, dreams. Roland was staring at her, his face pale. "It was frightened. It wanted me to attack you instead, so it made you look like a drome, and it tried to look like you. But it didn't know how to speak. You do. Now, have you seen a baby boy here?" "What?" "The Queen took him, but I'm fetching him home. I'll take you too if you like." "No one ever gets away." "Well, I mean to, and I've got help." "Where?" Roland looked around. There was no sign of the Feegles. "Oh, they always turn up when I need—" But suddenly there was something very empty about the forest. Hello? Rob? William? Daft Wally?" No reply. "They got trapped in the dream," said Roland. "They can't have. I killed the drome. It's more complicated than that. There's dreams inside dreams, and the Queen controls them all. You never know if you've really woken up, and you're probably only another dream." Roland turned his back and walked away, following the line of hoofprints. And Tiffany was left with nothing but the trees and the shadows. Anything could be waiting there. Now she felt the taste and feel of fear. She gripped the pan, but it didn't seem quite such a good weapon any more. The twilight was misty now and shimmered unpleasantly. The cold blue shadows between the trees seemed to be spreading out. She pulled out the toad, and it lay snoring on the palm of her hand. She gave it a prod. "What?" "I'm all alone in a wood of evil dreams. It's getting darker. What should I do?" The toad opened one bleary eye. "Leave?" "That's no help." "Best advice there is. Now put me back. The cold makes me lethargic." Reluctantly, Tiffany did. Then, gripping the pan tightly, she stepped forward. The long blue shadows seemed to crawl around on the snow of their own accord, and when she walked towards them, they backed away. That at least was a relief, but they were piling up behind her, following her. She turned and stamped her foot a few times, and they scurried off behind trees, but she knew they flowed back when she wasn't looking. The track now led uphill a little, and at the top of the rise, Tiffany looked down into a shallow valley, and in it were 4 dromes, big ones. They were sitting in a square, their dumpy legs stretched out in front of them. Each had a gold collar around its neck attached to a chain. Tame ones? Tiffany thought. But who could put a collar on a drome? Only someone who could dream as well as they could. We tame sheepdogs to help us herd sheep, she thought, and the Queen uses dromes to herd dreams. In the centre of the square formed by the dromes, the air was full of mist that glowed faintly. The hoof tracks led into it. Tiffany spun round. The shadows darted back. And now she could see 3 more dromes, their big, round, soggy faces peering at her around tree trunks. So she was being herded. That was frightening, but also annoying. Yes, annoying. This whole stupid, strange place annoyed her. It was the same feeling she'd had when Jenny had leapt out of the river. Her river! And the Queen had taken her brother. Maybe it was selfish to think like that, but anger was better than fear. Fear was a damp, cold mess, but anger had an edge. She could use it. So they were herding her, were they, like a sheep? Well, an angry sheep could send a vicious dog away whimpering. So, raising the pan to shoulder height and suppressing a dreadful urge to go to the toilet, Tiffany walked down the slope, through the mist, and into summer. The heat struck like a blow lamp, so sharp and sudden that she gasped. The world around her was in worrying shades of dull green, yellow, and purple without shadows. She was standing in reeds, much taller than her, with sunflowers growing among them, except the sunflowers were white, because they weren't, in fact, sunflowers. They were daisies. She knew that, because she'd stared at them dozens of times in that strange picture in the fairy tales book. Nor were these giant reeds around her. They were blades of grass. She was very, very small inside the weird picture. Somewhere there was a loud crack and a ragged cheer. Someone clapped. "Good man. Well done." On a flat rock, in a bright, stiflingly hot clearing, a man with a 2-handed hammer was cracking nuts half as big as himself. He was being watched by a crowd of people. Tiffany couldn't think of anything else suitable, but it was stretching the word a bit. For one thing, they were different sizes. Some of the men were taller than her, but others were tiny. Some had faces you wouldn't look at twice. Others had faces no one would want to look at even once. Well, this is a dream after all, she told herself. It doesn't have to make sense or be nice. She stepped forward as the man raised his hammer again. "Excuse me." "Yes." "Is there a queen around here?" The man nodded towards the other side of the clearing. "Her Majesty has gone to her bower." "That being a nook or resting place?" "Correct, Miss Tiffany." "Don't ask how he knows your name," she told herself. "Thank you. Best of luck with the nut cracking." "This one's the toughest yet." Tiffany walked on past this collection of strange, nearly people. Probably the scariest were the 2 big women. Now, big women were valued on the chalk. Farm work was hard. There was no call for a wife who couldn't carry a couple of piglets or a bale of hay. These 2, though, could have carried a horse each. But they had tiny, stupid little wings on their backs. "Morning," said Tiffany cheerfully. They stared at her haughtily, as if trying to work out what she was. Sitting near them was a little man with a large head, a fringe of white beard and pointy ears, wearing very old-fashioned clothes. His eyes followed Tiffany. "Morning." But he waved a pale hand as if to brush her away. Shaking her head, Tiffany walked on and stood under a round leaf much bigger than she was. "Psst!" Tiffany wondered if she dared to turn. "It's me." She turned to face a clump of daisies twice the height of a man. "Are you mad?" said the daisies. "I'm looking for my brother." "The horrible child who screams for sweeties all the time?" "Yes." "Who's permanently sticky and threatens to go to the toilet if he's left alone?" "Yes." "You really want him back?" "Yes." The daisy stems parted, and the boy Roland darted out. "Are you sure you can get out of here? You can take me with you?" "Of course." Well, she hoped so. "All right. I'll let you." "Oh, you'll let me, will you?" "Yes, I ought to get back before my father worries." Tiffany felt the second thought starting. They said, "Don't change expression, just check." How long have you been here, exactly?" "Oh, it can't be very long. Hours, maybe a day. I've only been hungry 2 or 3 times." It's been a bit longer. Nearly a year. Your father's been very miserable." Now the boy looked frightened. "Oh, no." "Well, it's not your fault you were stolen by the Queen." She hesitated. His expression gave it away. Was it?" "Well, there was this fine lady on a horse with bells all over its harness. She galloped past me when I was out hunting, and she was laughing. So of course I chased after her and—" He fell silent. Probably not a good decision. "But it was great at first. You know, an adventure. She fed me sweetmeats." "What are they?" Tiffany's dictionary hadn't included that one. "Are they like sweetbreads, the pancreas or thymus of a cow?" "No, more like nougat." "All right, go on." "Then she told me to sing and dance and skip and play. She said that's what children do." Tiffany wondered about this. As far as she knew, children mostly argued, picked their noses, got dirty, and sulked. Any seen dancing and skipping and singing had probably been stung by a wasp. "And did you skip and play?" "Would you? I'm 12. I'd feel like an idiot. But you mustn't make the Queen angry. I've seen what happens to those who do. She sets the bumblebee women on them." "Are those the huge women with the tiny wings?" "Yes, they're vicious, and if the Queen gets really angry with someone, she simply stares at them and they change." "Into what?" "Other things." Roland shuddered. "They get dragged off and left for the dromes. Listen, dreams are really real here. Nightmares, too. You can die." "But this doesn't feel real," Tiffany told herself. "This feels like a dream I could almost wake up from. And I must always remember that somewhere not far away is a world of green turf under a blue sky. That's real, and I want to get my brother and go home while I'm still angry, because when I stop being angry, that'll be the time to get frightened again, too frightened to think, and I must think." She lifted the frying pan again. "I'm going to see the Queen." "Don't." "I'm going to get my brother." "I'm not going to come with you, then. I don't want to see what she turns you into." Tiffany stepped out into the shadowless light and followed the path up a slope. Here and there more strangely shaped people turned to watch her. She glanced behind her. The Nutcracker had found a bigger hammer and was getting ready to strike. "Wanna, sweetie." Tiffany's head shot round like a weathercock in a tornado. She ran on, ready to swing the pan at anything in her way, and burst through a clump of grass into a space lined with daisies. It could well have been a bower. Wentworth was sitting on a large flat stone surrounded by sweets, many bigger than he was. Not really raspberry red, fake lemon yellow, curiously chemical orange, some kind of acidy green, and who knows what blue. Tears were falling off his chin in blobs. Serious stickiness was taking place. He was howling. Tiffany knew immediately what the problem was. His sugar-addled brain told him that there were so many sweets he'd never be able to eat them all, and that was too much to cope with. She dropped the pan and swept him up in her arms. "It's Tiffy," she whispered. "We're going home." "And this is where I meet the Queen," she thought. But there was no scream of rage, no explosion of magic, nothing. She saw that the other side of the bower contained a couch of leaves surrounded by hanging flowers. But there was no one there. "That's because I'm behind you," said the Queen's voice in her ear. Tiffany turned. No one there. "Still behind you, child. This is my world. You'll never be as clever as me. Why are you trying to take my boy away?" "He isn't yours. He's ours." "But you never loved him. You've a heart like a little snowball." Tiffany's forehead wrinkled. Love? What's that got to do with it? He's my brother! My brother!
Oh, yes, that's very witchy. Mine, mine, mine. That's all a witch cares about.
You stole him.
Stole? You mean you owned him?
Why won't you let me see you? Are you frightened?
Frightened? Of you?
The Queen was in front of her, slim and much taller than Tiffany. Her hair was long and black, her face pale, her lips cherry red, her dress black and white and red. She gave Tiffany a beautiful smile, but it was all very slightly wrong. Tiffany's second thought said, "She's like a doll. No one real is as perfect as that." "That's not you at all," she said. "Only your dream of you." The Queen's smile became edgy and brittle.
Such rudeness.
"Look at her eyes," said Tiffany's second thoughts. "She's not using them to see you with. They're simply beautiful ornaments."
"You've invaded my home. This offends me."
Tiffany held Wentworth tighter. "You steal things. You stole my brother."
"But he was wandering around lost. I brought him home, comforted him. All I wanted was a bit of company. Am I a monster?"
"No, you're a thief and a bully, and you're just like the drones. You've only got one trick." The Queen's fine eyebrows arched, and Tiffany's third thought said, "Yes, watch her face. She's worried. And that's not your body either. It's only what you want people to see." And there it was. Now Tiffany could see what her third thoughts had spotted. The Queen's face flickered for a moment. "It's not real. It's like everything else here, hollow and empty." The Queen slapped her much harder than a dream should be able to. Tiffany landed in the moss, and Wentworth rolled away, yelling, "Wanna go a toilet?" "Good," said Tiffany's third thoughts. "Good?" said Tiffany aloud.
"Good?"
said the Queen. "Yes," said the third thoughts, "because she doesn't know you can have third thoughts, and you're only a few inches from the frying pan. Now make her furious so she doesn't think. Hurt her." "You live in a land full of winter, and all you do is dream of summers," said Tiffany. "No wonder the king went away." Again the walking dream flickered, and Tiffany saw something not much bigger than her, almost human and a little shabby, and for a moment shocked. Then the Queen was back, tall and angry, and Tiffany grabbed the pan, rolled onto her feet, and swung it. It hit the tall figure. The Queen wavered like air over a hot road and screamed. Tiffany didn't wait to see what else would happen. She grabbed Wentworth and ran down the path. There was a booming sound on the other side of the clearing, and the two huge women rose off the ground, their tiny wings blurring. Suddenly someone grabbed her, pulling her into the grasses. It was Roland. "Can you get out now?" he demanded. Come on then, run!" They dashed through the giant daisies. "Do you know a way out?" "No." "Then why are we running?"
"To keep out of her way. If you hide long enough, sometimes she forgets."
"I don't think she'll forget me," Tiffany thought. Finally Roland stopped, but Tiffany ran on.
"Where are you going?"
"I really need to keep out of her way."
"No, come back. You're running back."
"No, I'm not. I'm running in a straight line." Roland caught her up.
"But this is a dream. You're running around in—"
Tiffany burst into a clearing. The clearing. The bumblebee women landed on either side of her, and the Queen stepped forward.
"Now, give me back the boy, Tiffany."
But the colours were brighter now, sounds louder. Tiffany could smell something too. It was sharp and bitter, the smell of snow, and underneath the insect buzzings in the grass she heard the faintest of voices.
"Clivens, can he find the weird?"
On the other side of the clearing, where the nut-cracking man was at work, the last nut, half as high as Tiffany, was rocking gently. When the cracker swiped at it, it rolled out of the way. "See what's really there," she told herself. She turned, whispering to Roland, who was standing behind her. "Crack the nut. Don't worry about me. Crack the nut." The boy looked at her blankly. "What are you saying to him?" snapped the Queen. "I'm saying goodbye." "Crack the nut." "Eh? Oh, right." As Roland ran towards the hammerman, Tiffany held her brother tightly. "I'm not handing him over, no matter what." The Queen smiled sweetly. "Do you know what colour your insides are?" "No." "Well, now you'll find out." She leant down. Her grey eyes filled Tiffany's world. The pupils were like silver mirrors. "Would you like to beg for mercy now? You may not be able to later." Tiffany stared. "I know what you are," her third thought said. "Something that's never learned anything. Just a child that's got old." "Want a sweetie?" she whispered. "Sweetie? I'll show you sweet—" There was a shout behind them. Roland was holding the heavy hammer. He raised it over his head, knocking over the elf behind him. The hammer fell. A roaring, cursing, red and blue tide of Nac Mac Feegles poured out of the smashed nut. Some were still wearing bow ties. Some were back in their kilts. All were in fighting mood.
"Crivens, it's the Queen. She's got to her. Killed her. Get her. Nae Queen, we free man."
The clearing cleared. It took the Feegles a little while to realize they'd run out of people to fight, so they fought one another for a bit anyway. Then they settled down. "A nut," said Tiffany. "How did you get into that?"
"Only way we could find in,"
said Rob Anybody.
"It's got to be a way that fits. 'Tis difficult work navigating in dreams, especially when you're a wee bitty pesht,"
said Daft Wally. "What?" Rob looked a little shifty.
"Well, ye ken that dream with the big party. It took us a wee while to get out." "Aye, until we finished the drink."
Rob glared at Daft Wally.
"You didn't have to put it like that."
"And where's the Queen gone to now?" Tiffany demanded.
"Ach, she did an offski, and so should we afore the dream changes."
Rob nodded at Wentworth.
"Is this the wee bairn with a nose full of bogies?"
Wentworth chuckled.
"Funny, wee man, wee man."
This surprised Tiffany. Wentworth never showed much interest in anyone who wasn't a jelly baby.
"Rab,"
a pixie called.
"we've got a real one."
To her horror, Tiffany saw that Roland was lying full length on the ground, unconscious.
"Aye, that's the laddie who was rude, and he tried to hit Big Jan with a hammer too. What shall we do with him?"
"Well, we can't leave him here." Suddenly the grasses were trembling. Light was fading from the sky. The air was growing colder too.
"Okay, we'll tuck him, but let's move right noo. Can you see the door, Kildar?"
Tiffany looked around desperately. The wind was bitter now. She shut her eyes and thought she heard her brain creak with the effort of thinking. If she was in a dream, then all she had to do was wake up. She thought about snow, crisp and white as fresh bedsheets. She concentrated on the feel of it under her feet. She was standing in snow.
"I got out." "Ach, sometimes the door's in your ain head. No, let's move."
Tiffany felt herself lifted into the air. Nearby, a snoring Roland rose up on dozens of small blue legs.
"Right, nae stopping until we get right out to here. Feegles, wahey!"
They skimmed over the snow. But after a minute or two, Tiffany looked behind them and saw the blue shadows moving. They were getting darker too. "Rob!"
"Aye, I ken. Run, lads!"
Snow stung Tiffany's face. Trees blurred as the forest sped past. They passed the last tree, and the snowfields stretched ahead. Then they stopped so quickly Tiffany almost toppled into the snow. "What's up?"
"Where's all our old footprints gone?"
said Daft Wally.
"They was there a moment ago."
The trampled track that before had led them on had vanished.
"So which way noo?"
Rob looked back at the forest. Boiling blackness curled above it like smoke, spreading out along the horizon.
"Ach, she's a bad loser, the Queen. She's sending nightmares after us."
The Pixies drew their swords, and Tiffany saw shapes in the spreading night. What kind of nightmares?
"Things with muckle legs, huge teeth, floppy wings, and 100 eyes. Aye, and was."
Tiffany hugged Wentworth tightly and shuddered. Things were visible in the speeding dark now. She could hear a high-pitched sort of chittering noise. "Can you fight nightmares?"
"There's no a thing we canna gie a face full of dandruff,"
growled Big Yan. Tiffany stared at the onrushing things. Some of them have got more than one head.
"Or lucky day, then."
The Pixies shifted their weight, ready to fight.
"Piper!"
"No," said Tiffany, "I'm not standing for this. The way to fight nightmares is to wake up. Head for those trees." The Pixies looked at the trees, then at Tiffany. "Do what I tell you. I'm your Kelda. This is an order. I'm going to get you home. I hope," she added to herself, but she'd seen a small, round, pale face staring at them around a tree trunk. There was a drome in those trees.
"Ach, aye, but—"
"Do it!" Everyone ran for the trees. Then Tiffany pulled from her apron pocket the crumpled wrapper of Jolly Sailor tobacco. It was something to focus on, to remind her of a dream. Meanwhile, the ring of nightmares got closer. Some of the sounds were horrible. Cracking bones, stinging insects, screaming cats, getting nearer, nearer, nearer. There was sand and white waves crashing and water draining off the shingle.
"Crivens, where are we noo?"
said Daft Wally.
"Aye, and why are we all looking like yellow mushrooms?"
Tiffany giggled. Every Pixie was wearing an oilskin coat and a huge yellow rain hat. "The drome uses what it finds in your head," she thought. "But this is my dream. I can use it." There was a boat pulled up on the shingle. As one small yellow mushroom, the Feegles clambered into it. "What are you doing?"
"It's a good dream you've found us, but best if we was leaving."
"Why? We'll be safe here."
"Ach, the Queen finds a way in everywhere."
Oars were heaved into rowlocks, and a party of Feegles pushed the boat into the waves.
"No, and us the wee bairn."
Uncertainly, Tiffany waded through the cold water and handed Wentworth over.
"Wee man."
It was Wentworth's only joke, and he wasn't going to stop. Tiffany ran back up the beach and hauled Roland to his feet. He looked blearily at her. What was happening? Then he shut his eyes again, and Tiffany dragged him across the shingle. Rob grabbed his trousers and heaved him aboard.
"Crivens, are we taking this streak of uselessness?"
Of course. Tiffany hauled herself in, the oars creaked, and the boat jerked forward, plunging across the sea. "Head for the lighthouse."
"Aye, we can. It's the only place there is, and the Queen doesn't like light."
Rob grinned.
"It's a good dream, lady. Have you looked at the sky?"
Tiffany turned. It was blue, very blue. But halfway up the sky there was a band of yellow, and in the middle of it, looming over the world, was a lifebelt. On it, spelled backwards in letters larger than the moon, were the words, Jolly Sailor. "We're in the label?"
"Aye."
Tiffany took the label from her pocket and stared at it. There was the lifebelt, the lighthouse. But the Jolly Sailor himself was no longer there. What was there, though, on the printed sea, was a tiny rowing boat. She looked up. There were long, ragged storm clouds in the sky now.
"Aye, it didn't take her long to find a way in,"
muttered William. Tangling and tumbling, some of the clouds passed overhead, swooped towards the sea, then vanished beneath the waves like a waterspout in reverse. And it began to rain hard. "Is that it?" said Tiffany. "Is that all she can do?"
"I doot it,"
said Rob.
"Bend them oars, lads."
The boat shot forward, but now, against all normal rules, it was trying to go uphill. Then it was washed backwards. Something was rising, something white pushing the seas aside. A great shining dome rose higher, and then an eye. It focused on the tiny boat. "It's only the whalefish," said Tiffany calmly. "It's a dream of mine."
"What does it eat?"
Daft Wally asked. "Ah, I know that. I paid a cucumber once for a lesson. Beasts of the deep. Whales aren't dangerous. They only eat very small things."
"Row like the blazes, lads!"
yelled Rob. "Also, whales don't even have proper teeth." There was a creaking and a typhoon gust of fishy halitosis as the whalefish's mouth opened, full of enormous, pointy teeth.
"Aye,"
said Daft Wally. And in a way Tiffany couldn't describe, the whale looked like the Queen. She was in there somewhere. Her anger came back. "This is my dream," she shouted. "You're not allowed in." But a tail the size of a field rose, slapped down onto the sea, and the whale shot forward. "Keep rowing," Tiffany shouted. "We're nearly at the lighthouse now." The Pixies hauled on the oars.
"Here, William," said Rob. "How near us would you say it is, then?" "Good question, Rob. I'd say very close indeed."
Yes, it's nearly on us, Tiffany thought, but it's my dream. It's got to work. Any moment now.
"In fact, Rob, I'd go so far as to say it's exceedingly close."
Tiffany swallowed and hoped that the whale wouldn't. There was only about 30 yards of water between the teeth and the boat. And then it was filled with a wooden wall that made a zip, zip, zip noise as it went past. Tiffany looked up at white sails, rigging, and sailors. Then she saw the big bearded figure at the wheel dressed in yellow oilskins, and as the stern of the jolly sailor's ship disappeared into the rain and mist, he turned and waved just once. Tiffany stood up as the boat rocked in the swell and yelled at the towering whale, "This is my dream, my rules, so you've got to chase him. You chase him, he chases you. Granny Aching said so." The whale was having trouble. It was the whale, the one Granny had told her the story about, and not even the Queen could control a story like that. Reluctantly, it turned and vanished into the rain in the wake of the jolly sailor's ship. And Tiffany looked at the lighthouse. It really wasn't far. A little jetty stretched out from its tiny island, a drome sitting on the rocks, its pale fat legs sticking out in front of it. The Pixies poured out onto the jetty and tied the boat up. "In my dream, I always wake up when I reach the lighthouse," Tiffany said.
"We dinna trust the Queen. She'll be waiting behind the door, you can bet on it. You'll let us go in first?"
It was an instruction, not a question. Tiffany nodded and watched as the Feegles swarmed over the rocks towards the tower. She lifted the toad from her pocket. It opened its yellow eyes and stared.
"I'm on a beach."
"Yes."
"Where are the warning notices and life belts? Do I see a qualified lifeguard? I think not. Supposing someone were to... Would you put me down, please? I feel a headache coming on."
Tiffany put it down and it shuffled into some seaweed. After a while, she heard it eating something. The sea was calm now. It was peaceful. Then there were noises from the lighthouse, muffled shouts, thuds, and at one point a noise like something heavy falling down a long spiral staircase and hitting every step on the way. The door opened. The Nac Mac Feegles came out. They looked satisfied. "I'll wake up when I go through that door," said Tiffany, pulling Roland out of the boat. "This is my dream." She turned to the nearest Feegle. "Can you bring Wentworth? You won't get lost or drunk or anything?" Rob Anybody looked offended.
"We ne'er get lost."
"And drunk? Well, at least there shouldn't have been anything to drink in a lighthouse." She laughed. "Unless you drank the lamp oil, and no one would dare to do that. It'd make you terribly ill if you drank it. It's inflammable, too." Daft Wally belched loudly. There was a strong smell of paraffin. The Pixies went into a huddle.
"I told yez the wee skull on it meant we shouldn't touch it." "What's inflammable mean?" "It means it catches fire." Okay, dinny panic. No belching, and none of yous is to take a leak anywhere near any naked flames." "Don't you want to carry the wee lad?" said Rob.
"You bring him," said Tiffany shortly, meaning I'm still not totally sure this will work, so he might be safer with you than me. But I hope I'm going to wake up in my own bedroom. That would be nice. Then she heard a rushing sound behind her. The sea was disappearing, pulling back down the shore very quickly. Even as she watched, rocks and seaweed were suddenly left high and dry. "Ah," she said, "I know what this is. It's the tide. It goes in and out every day."
"Amazing," said Rob. "It looks like it's pouring awa through a hole."
Indeed, about 50 yards away, the sea-water was disappearing over an edge, and some of the Pixies were already heading towards it.
"And when does the tide come back?"
said Rob. Not for hours, I think."
"Tons of time, then."
Tiffany trailed after him. But she suddenly had a moment of nagging doubt that said, "Isn't the tide a bit slower?" They reached the edge, where the rest of the Pixies were now lined up. It was like looking down into a valley. At the far side, miles and miles away, the retreating sea was a mere gleaming line, and below them were the shipwrecks, lots of them, galleons, schooners and clippers, masts broken, hulls breached, lay strewn in what had been the bay. As one, the Pixies sighed happily.
"Sunken treasure! Gold! Jewels!"
"Aye," said Rob.
"Stealing treasure for the ocean bed's about the best thieving ever."
Tiffany felt panic. She pointed. "But that's a lighthouse, so ships don't run onto the rocks, right? Listen, the Queen's still around. This is a trap."
Can we go down and maybe look inside just one wee ship?"
"No, because—" Tiffany looked up. "Because the sea is coming back." What looked like a cloud on the horizon was getting bigger. She could hear the roar. So she ran back up the beach and got her hands under Roland's armpits. Then she turned round. The Pixies were still watching the huge, surging wave. And there was Wentworth, his back to her, still happily holding hands with two of the Feegles. The image branded itself on her eyes. The little boy, the Pixies, the rushing, sky-filling wall of water. "Come on!" she yelled. Sunken ships were being lifted up and spun around in the hissing mountains of surf. "Run!" Tiffany just managed to haul Roland to the lighthouse door as the water crashed behind her. For a moment the world was full of white light, and snow squeaked underfoot. It hadn't worked. It was the silent, cold land of the Queen again. Nothing except snow and the forest. Black clouds hovered over it. Ahead of her was a picture in the air. Some turf, a few stones lit by moonlight. The other side of the door, back home. She turned around desperately. "Rob? William? Wally? Wentworth?" Away towards the forest she heard the barking of the grimhounds. "Got to get out," she muttered. "Get away." Nothing stopped her as she grabbed Roland by the collar and dragged him between the stones of the doorway and onto the turf, where the air was warm and alive with nighttime insect noises. Under a real moon, under a real sky, she pulled the boy over to a fallen stone and sat him against it, and she could hear her own thoughts a long way off. They could still be alive. It was a dream, and there must be a way back. I have to go back in there. Find it. The 3 stones of the door were a black shape against the stars. But even as she watched, they slipped over, slowly, and fell down. Tiffany stood under the stars alone and tried not to cry. Oh, what a shame. You've let everybody down now, haven't you? The Queen was walking over the turf towards Tiffany. Where she'd trodden, frost gleamed, and the little part of Tiffany that was still thinking thought, "That grass will be dead in the morning. She's killing my turf." The Queen sat on the fallen stones. "Oh dear, you humans are such dreamers, you know. You dream that you're clever, special, you especially. You dreamt you were the heroine of a story, the brave girl rescuing little brother, but then you left him behind. I think being hit by 1,000,000,000 tons of seawater must be like having a mountain of iron drop on your head, don't you?" Tiffany couldn't think. Her third thoughts were somewhere in a hot pink fog trying to make themselves heard. "Got Roland out? Ah, but he's not yours. He's only a rather stupid boy with a red face and brains made of pork like his father. So you left your brother behind and rescued a spoilt fool." "But there was no time," shrieked the third thoughts. "You wouldn't have got to him and to the lighthouse. To get Roland out was the logical thing to do. You don't have to feel guilty about it. What's better, to try to save your brother and be brave, stupid, and dead, or save the boy and be brave, sensible, and alive?" But something else kept saying that stupid and dead would have been more right. "I expect it's not your fault you're so heartless," said the Queen. "It's probably all to do with your parents. They never gave you enough time, and having Wentworth was a cruel thing to do. They let you read too many books as well. It can't be good for a young brain knowing words like paradigm and eschatological. It leads to using your brother as monster bait." "You've got to stop listening," yelled the third thoughts. "It's so sad. You dream that you're strong, sensible, logical, but you're not even really properly human. You've no heart at all. You didn't even cry when Granny Aching died. You think too much, and now your precious thinking has let you down. I think it's best if I kill you, don't you?" And Tiffany became aware of other figures in the gloom. Some were people from the summer picture, but there were also drones, the headless horsemen, and the bumblebee women. And clouds were pouring across the sky like a stain. They were the inky clouds from the frozen world, the clouds of nightmare. They covered the stars. "I think we'll like it here," said the Queen. Frost slid over the ground, and Tiffany felt the cold creeping up her legs. It began to rain with ice in it. It hit the turf like bullets, turning it into chalky mud. Tiffany managed to take one step forward. Mud sucked at her boots. Ah, a bit of spirit at last. She tried another step, but things weren't working any more. She was too cold, too tired. She could feel herself disappearing, getting lost. She fell forward into the freezing mud. The blackness grew deeper, bitter and starless. The rain fell harder, stinging like needles, hammering on her head. It was colder than the deep winters when Granny Aching would plod from snowdrift to snowdrift looking for sheep. It was as cold as those killer days in early spring when lambing had begun and winter came howling down one more time. She felt that cold drawing all the heat out of her. It was the only sensation left, apart from a musical note. It was high, thin, and drawn out. Yes, there was darkness everywhere, but there was also a speck of light a long way off. One star, low down, moving. It zigzagged as it came. It got bigger. Silence covered Tiffany. A silence smelling of sheep and turpentine and tobacco. And then came movement, as if she were falling through the ground, and gentle warmth, and for a moment the sound of waves and her own voice inside her head. "This land is in my bones, land under wave." Whiteness. It tumbled through the warm, heavy darkness around her, something like snow, but as fine as dust. It piled up below her. She could see whiteness. A creature like an ice cream cone with tentacles shot past her and jetted away. "I'm under water," she thought. "I remember. This is the million-year reign under the sea. This is the new land being born underneath an ocean. The land under wave. Millions and millions of tiny shells. This land was alive." All the time there was the warm, comforting smell of the shepherding hut, and the feeling of being held in invisible hands. The whiteness below her rose up and over her head. It was like being in a mist. "Now I'm inside the chalk, like a flint, like a calkin." She wasn't sure how long she spent in the warm, deep water, if any time really had passed, or if millions of years went past in a second. But she felt movement again, a sense of rising. More memories poured into her mind. There's always been someone watching the borders. Someone has to care, and sometimes they have to fight. Someone has to speak for that which has no voice. She opened her eyes. She was still lying in the mud, and the Queen was laughing at her. But she felt warm. Hot, in fact, red hot with anger. Anger at the bruised turf, at her own stupidity, and anger at this beautiful creature, this creature that was trying to take her world. Witches are selfish, the Queen had said, but Tiffany's third thought said, then turn selfishness into a weapon. Make all things yours, other lives and dreams and hopes. Protect them. Bring them into the sheepfold. Keep away the wolf. My family, my land. How dare you try to take these things? They are mine. I have a duty. The anger overflowed. She stood up and clenched her fists, and lightning struck the ground on either side of her. Twice. It stayed there crackling, and two dogs formed. Steam rose from their coats, and as they shook themselves, blue light sparked from their ears. They looked at Tiffany. The Queen gasped and vanished. "Come by, lightning!" Tiffany shouted. "Away to me, thunder!" Two streaks of black and white sped away across the turf and up towards the clouds, and they herded the storm. The clouds panicked, scattered, but always there was a comet streaking across the sky. A snap of lightning sparked teeth, and they were turned. Monstrous shapes writhed and screamed in the boiling sky, but thunder and lightning had worked many flocks. Jostling, rumbling, and screaming, the storm rolled away towards the mountains, where there were deep canyons that could pen it. Meanwhile, Tiffany stared upwards, rain pouring off her face, glowing with triumph. She watched as the dogs came back and settled on the turf. And then she remembered something. These were not her dogs. They didn't take orders from a little girl, and they weren't looking at her. They were looking behind her. There was a gust of jolly sailor tobacco, sheep, and turpentine. She turned, not afraid of what she might see, but mortally frightened of what she might not see. Sparkling in the dark, light glittering off the white shepherdess dress and every blue ribbon and silver buckle of it, was Granny Aching, smiling hugely, glowing with pride. In one hand she held the ornamental crook. She pirouetted slowly, and Tiffany saw she still had her huge old boots on. Granny Aching took her pipe out of her mouth, gave Tiffany the little nod that was from her, a round of applause, and then she wasn't. Real starlit darkness covered the turf, and nighttime sounds filled the air. Tiffany didn't know if what had happened had been a dream. It didn't matter. It had happened. "But I'm still here," said the Queen, stepping in front of her. "Perhaps it was a dream. Perhaps you have gone a little mad, because you are, after all, a very strange child. Perhaps—"
"Crimmins!"
"Oh, no, not them." It wasn't just the Nac Mac Feegles, but also Wentworth, a strong smell of seaweed and a dead shark. They appeared in mid-air and landed in a heap between them. The pixies bounced, rolled, and came up drawing their swords.
"Oh, 'tis you, is it?"
said Rob Anybody, glaring up at the Queen.
"Be off with ye, you blousty old killiac!"
He turned to Tiffany.
"Leave this to us, Kilda."
The Queen snapped her fingers.
"Can you face these?"
Suddenly every Feegle's sword glowed blue, and Daft Wally said,
"Ach, we're in real trouble noo."
3 figures had appeared in the air. One wore a long red gown, a long wig, and black tights with buckles on his shoes. The others ordinary grey suits.
"Oh, you're a hard woman, Queen," said
William the Gonigal.
"to set the lawyers onto us. See that one?"
whimpered a pixie.
"He's got a briefcase, a briefcase. Oh, whaley, whaley, whaley." "Rob Anybody Feegle and sundry others," said one figure. "We have here a list of criminal and civil charges totaling 19,763 separate offences."
Pressing together in terror, the Feegles began to back away.
"We wasn't there,"
yelled Rob desperately.
"We get blamed for everything. The police hate us, and you're only picking on us 'cause we're blue."
But to groans from the cowering pixies, the other lawyer produced a roll of papers from his briefcase.
"Angus Big, Angus no as big Angus, Angus we—" "Ah, they've got our names,"
sobbed Daft Wally.
"Our names, it's the prison who's for us.
Archie Big, Archie One-Eyed, Archie Mad—"
"Objection. I move a writ of habeas corpus and enter a plea visne facium capite repletum without prejudice."
For a moment there was silence. Then the toad crawled out of the crowd.
"It's all come back to me,"
it said.
"The legal language brought it back. I'm a toad now, but once,"
it swallowed,
"I was a lawyer. And these charges are a tissue of lies based on hearsay evidence."
It raised yellow eyes to the Queen's lawyers.
"I further move that the case be adjourned sine die on the basis of potest ne mater tua suere amice."
The lawyers had pulled large books out of nowhere and were hastily thumbing through them. They looked worried and a little frightened.
"We're not familiar with counsel's terminology," said one. "Hey, they're sweating," said Rob. "Can we have lawyers on our side as well?" "Of course. Defence lawyers." "Defence? You're telling me we could get away with it?" "Certainly." "And what does all that visne faciam stuff mean?" "Visne faciam capite repletam. Approximately, would you like a face full of head?" "And to think we didn't know legal talking was that simple."
Rob's eyes gleamed.
"Let's get 'em, lads."
As one, the Nac Mac Feegle raised their swords in the air.
1,200 angry men, nae more courtroom drama. The law takes care of rascals. No!
The Queen waved her hand, and the lawyers and the pixies faded away. Now there was only her and Tiffany facing one another on the turf at dawn. "What have you done with them?"
"Oh, they're around somewhere. It's all dreams, anyway, and dreams within dreams. Nothing is real. Nothing lasts."
Tiffany wasn't quite sure which of her thoughts was operating now. She was tired and felt as though she were watching herself from above. She saw herself set her boots firmly on the turf, and then, like someone arising from clouds of sleep, she felt the deep, deep time below her, and sensed the breath of the downs and the distant roar of ancient, ancient seas trapped in millions of tiny shells. She thought of Granny Aching, under the turf, becoming part of the chalk again, part of the land under wave. She opened her eyes, and then somewhere inside opened her eyes again. She felt as tall as the sky, as old as the hills, and as strong as the sea. She heard the grass growing and the sound of worms below the turf. She could feel thousands of little lives around her. She knew exactly where she was, who she was, and what she was. She swung a hand and knocked the Queen off her feet. "Listen, I never cried for Granny because there was no need. She has never left me." She leant down, and centuries bent with her. "The secret is not to dream. The secret is to wake up. Waking up's harder. I have woken up, and I'm real. You cannot fool me any more, or touch me, or anything that is mine." She saw the terror in the Queen's face as she picked her up. The Queen was as light as a baby, and changed shape madly in Tiffany's arms, into monsters and mixed-up beasts, and things with claws and tentacles. But finally she was small and grey, like a monkey, with a large head and big eyes, and a little panting downy chest. They reached the stones. The arch still stood. It had never been down. The Queen had no magic, only the one trick, the worst one. Tiffany stepped through the stone doorway. "Now stay away from here. Never touch what is mine." And then, because the thing was so weak and baby-like, she added, "But I hope there's someone who'll cry for you. I hope the king comes back." "You pity me?" growled the thing that had been the Queen. "Yes, a bit." She put the creature down. It scampered across the snow, turned, and became the beautiful Queen again. "You won't win, you know. There's always a way in. People dream." "Sometimes we waken. Don't come back now, or there will be a reckoning." She concentrated, and now the stones framed nothing more or less than the country beyond. "I shall have to find a way of sealing that," said her third thoughts. Then she closed her eyes and closed her eyes again. She felt it all draining away. It was like falling asleep, sliding from that strange wide awakeness into normal, everyday, well, being awake. It felt as if everything were blurred and muffled. And this is how we always feel, she thought. No wonder we dream our way through our lives. To be awake and see it all as it really is, no one could stand that for long. Someone tapped her boot. Rob Anybody was glaring up at her.
"Hey, where did you get to?"
"It's over."
"Did you kill her?"
"No."
"Then she'll be back. She's awful stupid, that one."
Tiffany nodded. "How did you get away from the huge wave?"
"Ah, we're fast movers, and it was a strong lighthouse. Of course, the water came up pretty high, and it threw up a lot of sunken vessels full of treasure," said William the Gonigal. "We stopped off for a wee pillage."
The Feegles held up jewels and big gold coins. "But that's just dream treasure, surely. Fairy gold. It'll turn into rubbish in the morning."
"Aye."
Rob glanced at the horizon.
"OK, you heard the Kelda lads. We got half an hour to sell it to someone. Permission to offski."
"Oh, fine. Thank you." They were gone, in a split-second blur of blue and red. But William the Gonigal remained for a moment.
"You didn't do so badly, and we're proud of you. So would your granny be, remember that. You're not unloved."
Then he vanished too.
"We women all gone,"
said Wentworth sadly. "What were they?" muttered Roland, sitting up and holding his head. "It's a bit complicated. Do you remember much? It all seems like a dream." "Yes, well, dreams can be funny things. And I must stay here for a while," Tiffany thought. "Why, I don't know. But I must wait for something. Can you walk down to the village?" "I think so." Then will you take Wentworth with you, please? Drop him off at the farm and tell my parents I'll be down soon." "Are you sure?" "Yes, I won't be long."
"Crivens," said Wentworth. "Want bed."
When the two of them had disappeared, she sat down and hugged her knees. A buzzard screamed in the dawn greyness. She looked up as a tiny dot detached itself from the bird, too high up even for a pixie to stand the fall. She scrambled to her feet again as Hamish tumbled through the sky, and then something ballooned above him. The fall became a gentle floating, and as the bulging shape above him got bigger, it became more familiar. He landed, and a pair of Tiffany's pants settled down on top of him.
"That was great! Nae more landing on my head for me."
"Hamish, those are my best pants. You stole them off our clothesline, didn't you?"
"Oh, aye, but I had to cut the lace off, 'cause it got in the way."
Tiffany sighed. She liked the lace. She didn't have many things that weren't necessary. "I think you'd better keep them."
"Aye, I will then. No, what was it? Oh, yes, ye have visitors coming. I spotted them over the valley. Look up there."
There were two other things up there. Tiffany watched as they circled lower. They were broomsticks. "I knew I had to wait," she thought. As the buzzard picked up Hamish again, the broomsticks descended. The lower one had two figures on it, and when it landed, Tiffany saw that one of them was Miss Tick, clinging anxiously onto a smaller figure who'd been doing the steering. She half fell off and tottered over to Tiffany.
"You wouldn't believe the time I've had. A nightmare. We flew through a storm. Are you all right?"
Yes. The Queen's gone."
"What? Gone? Oh, these ladies are Mrs. Ogg. Morning."
The broom's other occupant was a short, fat lady with a cheerful face like a wrinkled apple that's been stored too long.
"And this is
Mistress."
Sorry, Mistress Weatherwax. Very, very good witches. I was lucky to find them up in the mountains."
The other witch had an elderly, thin face that gave nothing away. She wasn't tall, but she stood tall. Piercing blue eyes looked Tiffany up and down. "Good boots."
"Tell Mistress Weatherwax what happened,"
Miss Tick began, but the witch held up a hand, gave Tiffany a look that went right through her head and about 5 miles out on the other side, then walked to the stones. She waved one hand, an odd movement, a kind of wriggle in the air, and for a moment it left a glowing line. "Jolly sailor tobacco?"
"Yes."
The witch waved her hand again. "Nac Mac Feegles? Kelder?"
Only temporary."
Wave. "Frying pan?"
"Yes, it got lost, though."
Wave. Mistress Weatherwax stared at pictures only she could see. "Land of snow? Queen? On the sea?" The flashing stopped. "So you beat the Queen in the end, but you had help, I think?"
"Yes."
"And that was—" "I don't ask you your business." Tiffany said it before she even realized she was going to. Miss Tick gasped.
"Tiffany, Mistress Weatherwax is the most famous witch in all—"
But Mistress Weatherwax waved a hand at her, took off her pointed hat, and bowed to Tiffany. "Well said. I didn't have no right to ask. This is your country, and we're here by your leave. I show you respect, as you in turn will respect me." The air seemed to freeze for a moment. Then Mistress Weatherwax went on. "But if one day you care to tell me more, I'd be grateful. Your grandmother sounds like the kind of person I would have liked to meet. In the meantime, we'd better see if there's anything left you can still be taught." "Is this where I learn about the witches' school?" There was a silence. "Witches' school?"
Said Miss Tick.
"Oh, you were being metaphorical, weren't you?" said Tiffany.
She means metaphorical."
"Yes, like stories. It's all right, I've worked it out. You can't really give lessons on witchcraft, not properly. This is the school, isn't it? The world, here. And you don't realise it until you look." "Nicely said," said Mistress Weatherwax. "But tell me," said Miss Tick, "how did you manage it? You've become a witch on chalk. How?" "Oh, that's all you know, Perspicacia Tick," said Mistress Weatherwax. "The bones of the hills is flint, hard and sharp and useful, king of stones." Then she picked up her broomstick. "And now we have to hurry. There's a man riding up here on a farm horse, fair hair, red face. Sounds like my father. Will you get into trouble, do you think?" "I might." "Want any help?" "No. If it's my trouble, I'll get out of it." "Right." Mistress Weatherwax climbed onto her broomstick. "Come here, young lady." Tiffany obeyed. "Times ahead might be a little tricky. You'll need this. It might be a comfort." She made a circle in the air around Tiffany's head, then brought her hand up over the head, making little movements with her forefinger. Tiffany raised her hands, and they touched something. It was like a sensation in the air. "Is it really there?" "Who knows? It's virtually a pointy hat. No one else will know it's there." "You mean it only exists in my head?" "You've got a lot of things in your head, my girl. Best not to ask too many questions." "What happened to the toad?" said Miss Tick, who did ask questions. "It's gone to live with the wee free men. It turned out it used to be a lawyer." "You've given the Nac Mac Feegle their own lawyer?" said Mrs. Ogg. "That'll make the world tremble. Still, I always say the occasional tremble does you good." "Come, sisters, we must away," said Miss Tick, as she climbed onto the other broomstick behind Mrs. Ogg.
"Now there's no need for that sort of talk. That's theatre talk. Cheerio, Tiff. See you again."
Mrs. Ogg's stick rose gently into the air. From the stick of Mistress Weatherwax, though, there was merely a sad little noise.
Gazunk, 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 gazunk. Gazunk, gazunk, gazunk.
Mistress Weatherwax sighed. "It's them dwarfs. They say they've repaired it. Oh, yes, and it starts first time in their workshop." They heard the sound of hooves. Mistress Weatherwax swung off the stick, grabbed it firmly in both hands, and ran away across the turf, skirts billowing behind her. She was already a speck in the distance when Tiffany's father came over the brow of the hill. Tiffany heard a faint behind her as her father leapt off the horse. She was surprised to see him laughing and crying at the same time. It was all a bit of a dream. Tiffany found that a very useful thing to say, all a bit of a dream. It's hard to remember. I can't be certain. Her mother had insisted she go to bed, even though it was still broad daylight, but actually she didn't mind. She was tired, and she lay under the covers halfway between asleep and awake. She'd heard the Baron and her father talking downstairs as they tried to make sense of it all. "Obviously the girl had been very brave." This was the Baron speaking. "But, well, she was only 9, wasn't she? Didn't even know how to use a sword, whereas Roland had had fencing lessons." So Roland with the beefy face was the hero, was he? And she was like the stupid princess who fainted all the time. That was completely unfair. She reached out to the table beside her bed where she'd put the invisible hat. Her mother had put down a cup of broth right through it, but it was still there. Her fingers felt, faintly, the roughness of the brim. Yes, it was her secret, all of it. No one else must know about the wee free men. Admittedly, Wentworth had taken to running around with the tablecloth round his waist, shouting, "Wee mans, I'll scone you in the boot." But Mrs. Aching was so glad to see him back and talking about things other than sweets that she wasn't paying much attention. No, she couldn't tell anyone. They'd never believe her anyway. Besides, what would Granny Aching have done? Granny would have puffed on her pipe and said nothing. Tiffany smiled to herself. She slept and didn't dream, and a day went past. And another day. On the third day it rained, so Tiffany took down the china shepherdess from the kitchen shelf, put it in a sack, then ran up onto the downs. When she reached the spot where an old stove and 4 iron wheels stood out of the grass, she cut a square of turf, carefully chipped out a hole for the china shepherdess, then put the turf back. It seemed the right thing to do. And she was sure she caught a whiff of tobacco. Then she went to the Pixies' mound. There she heard music and voices, and then sudden silence as she peered into the gloom. Carefully she took a bottle of special sheep liniment from her sack and let it slide into darkness. As she walked away, she heard the faint music start up again. She waved at a buzzard circling lazily under the clouds, and she was sure a tiny dot waved back. On the fourth day, Tiffany did her chores, but she did have help. "I want you to feed the chickens," she said to Wentworth. "What do I want you to do?"
"Feed the cucks."
"Chickens."
"Chickens."
"And on the way back, see if you can carry a whole log, will you?"
"Ah, Crivens."
"And what is it we don't say? We don't say the
Crivens word.
in front of...
In front of Mummy."
Good. Now get the eggs." When he'd wandered away, Tiffany turned out some butter onto the marble slab in the dairy and picked up the paddles to pat it into, well, a pat of butter. As she began to shape it, she was aware of a shadow in the doorway. It was Roland, his face even redder than usual, and he was twiddling his expensive hat nervously. "Yes?" "Look, about all that..." "Yes?" "Look, I didn't lie to anyone. My father sort of assumed I'd been brave, a hero. It doesn't matter." The little paddles went pat, pat, pat on the fresh butter. "You don't mind?" "Nope." "But it's not fair." "We know the truth." Pat, 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 pat. I did try, honestly." "Yes, I expect you did," Tiffany thought. "But you're not very clever, and the Baron certainly is a man without first sight. He sees the world the way he wants to see it." Pat, pat, pat-a-pat. "One day you'll be Baron, won't you, Roland?" "Yes, one day. Look, are you really a witch?" "When you're Baron," Tiffany turned the butter round, "you'll be good at it, I expect. Fair, generous, decent. You'll pay good wages and look after the old people."
"Well, I hope I..."
Tiffany turned to face him, a butter paddle in each hand. "Because I'll be there, you see. I'll be there on the edge of the crowd all the time. You'll look up and see my eye on you. I'll be watching everything. Because I come from a very long line of Aching people, and this is my land. I hope you can be a good Baron for us. If not, there will be a reckoning."
"Look,"
Roland began, going even redder in the face, "you can't talk to me like that, you know." Tiffany was sure she heard up in the roof, on the very edge of hearing, someone say,
"Ah, Crivens, what a wee snotter."
She shut her eyes and, heart-pounding, pointed at an empty bucket. "Bucket, fill yourself." There was a whoosh-whoosh noise. It blurred, then sloshed. Water dripped down the side. Roland stared at it, his face pale. "And now, if you don't mind, Roland, I've this to finish and some cheese to make. Go away." Roland ran. "All right, who's there?"
"It's me, mistress."
No as big as medium-sized Jock, but bigger than wee Jock appeared from behind the newly filled bucket.
"Rob, anybody said we should keep an eye on ye for a while and thank ye for the offering."
It's still magic, even if you do know how it's done, Tiffany thought.
Fion's gone off to be Kelder for a clan over near Copperhead Mountain. She's asked me to go as the Gunnagle."
"Congratulations.
Aye, and,
Yes?
Hamish says there's a girl in the Long Lake clan who's looking to be a kelder. It's a fine clan.
Good. Invite her over right away.
You dinna mind?
No, not at all. Although she did a little.
Ah, that's grand. I'll awa and tell the lads.
He paused.
Would you like me to run after that big heap of jobies that just left and see falls off his horse again?
No, don't. Leave him to me, she smiled. You can leave everything to me. When she was alone again, she finished the butter. Pat, 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 pat. Finally she put the paddles down and picked up the stamp that yesterday she'd carved carefully out of a piece of apple wood. She stamped it onto the butter, and there, glistening on the rich yellow surface, was a gibbous moon, with, sailing in front of it, a witch on a broomstick. She smiled, and it was Granny Aching's smile. Things would be different one day, but you had to start small, like oak trees. Then she made cheese. In the dairy, on the farm, and the fields unrolling and becoming the downlands sleeping under the hot midsummer sun, where flocks of sheep, moving slowly, drift over the turf like clouds on a green sky, and here and there sheepdogs speed over the grass like shooting stars, for ever and ever, wold without end.